Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I'd been running loads between Laredo and Nashville for a few years when this happened. I was solo at the time, working for a mid-sized company with decent rigs and good routes. I like driving nights, less traffic, cooler air, just me and the road. This was last summer, late August, I think. I'd left Laredo around 5 p.m. with a full trailer headed to a warehouse outside Memphis, same route I'd done dozens of times. Weather was clear, road was dry, nothing out of the ordinary. I remember eating a gas station burrito around 10 near Dallas and fueling up before pushing northeast. It was around 2 a.m. when I crossed into Arkansas, just outside Hope. That's where it starts getting weird. I've got a dash cam that records everything, front-facing and cabin. My company requires it, and I usually don't think much about it. It loops automatically, stores clips to an SD card, uploads every few hours when I hit service. I've had it catch a few close calls with deer and one bad fender bender in Oklahoma, but nothing strange before this. Anyway, around 3:15 a.m. I was driving north on Highway 29, just past a rest stop I usually skip. The road there is pretty flat, surrounded by low pine. No lights, no towns for miles. I wasn't tired, not dangerously anyway. I'd had a Coke, windows cracked, just cruising. Then I noticed the radio cut out. Not a static fade, just silence. The screen stayed lit, but no audio. I tapped the knob, flipped stations, nothing. Thought maybe I hit a dead zone, but it had been playing fine for the last 100 miles. A few seconds later, my GPS screen froze. Time, speed, everything just stuck. I tapped it, but it didn't respond. My phone, mounted right next to it, was showing 317. The GPS said 308. I remember that because it felt off, like I was slipping behind somehow. Right then, I felt this pressure in my ears. Not a pop, like from altitude. Just a building tension, like the cabin was sealing itself off. I turned off the vent and listened. It was dead quiet except for the hum of the tires. No engine rattle, no wind, just the sound of the road. Then, just as quickly, everything came back. Radio kicked in mid-song, GPS jumped to 323. The phone was still at 323 too. I figured maybe I'd zoned out a bit and just hadn't noticed. I got to Memphis just after 7 a.m., unloaded, and checked in with dispatch. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when I stopped for breakfast, I decided to scroll through the dash cam out of curiosity. I wanted to see if there was any weird interference during that silent period. That's when I saw the gap. From 3:08 a.m. to 3:23 a.m., both camera feeds were just gone. The files jumped from one timestamp to the next as if nothing happened. No corruption warning, no error message, just 15 minutes missing. Everything before and after was perfectly normal. The files were there, labeled in sequence, just those 15 minutes were missing entirely. I assumed maybe the card glitched, so I checked the backup on my laptop. Same thing. Every other hour of the drive was fine. It was just that one block, 3:08 to 3:23, missing from both the forward and cabin views. The weird part? The GPS shows I was still moving. I didn't pull over or stop, and my truck's logbook recorded steady speed the whole time. No sudden decelerations, no hard braking, just normal driving. I didn't think much more of it until later that night, when I was parked in a motel in Jackson, waiting for my next load. I decided to check the internal truck cam, the one above the rearview mirror that catches a wider angle of the cabin. I usually don't pull from it unless there's a reason. It just stores low-res footage as a backup. I synced it to my laptop, skipped ahead to the 3:08 timestamp. It recorded something. The clip was there, but it was off. The cabin was lit by the dash lights. You could see me, hands on the wheel, eyes forward. I was driving. Not slumped over or unconscious, just blank. No blinking, no glancing at mirrors, no fidgeting, totally still. Eyes locked straight ahead. I watched it 3 times. It's hard to explain, but it didn't look like me. Not really. It looked like someone trying to be me. Like a really good actor who just couldn't quite get the movements right. I never moved, not once. Just drove straight for 15 minutes like I was on autopilot. Even creepier, my mouth was slightly open, not breathing heavy or anything, just open. No sound, just Still, the truck didn't drift, didn't slow down. Everything on the instrument panel stayed normal. But the camera caught this flicker, like interference. Every few seconds, there'd be a quick pulse of static across the screen, horizontal lines, really fast. No sound with it, just a visual glitch. The outside cam didn't catch any of that, just the inside one. There weren't any headlights behind me, no oncoming cars. I checked the GPS playback. I was on a straight stretch the whole time, no turns, no exits, no stops, just 15 miles of flat road and pine trees, driving with a blank stare and my mouth slightly open. After 3:23, everything snapped back to normal. In the next clip, I'm reaching for a drink, checking mirrors, blinking. I look tired, but alert. Just regular driving again. I showed the footage to a mechanic friend of mine who used to drive long haul. He said, maybe I nodded off with my eyes open, but that doesn't explain the dashcam footage still running before and after, or why only that one segment was missing, or why the backup cam caught it while the main one didn't. I didn't report it to dispatch. What would I even say? Truck drove itself while I sat there like a mannequin. I figured if there was an electrical fault, it would have shown up on diagnostics. But nothing did. A week later, I went back and checked the data again. The 308 to 323 clip from the internal cam had degraded. Not corrupted exactly, just fuzzier, like it had been copied and recopied too many times. The facial detail was harder to see. The flickers were still there though, still regular. Every 7 seconds, like clockwork. I started keeping an analog watch on the dash after that, just as a backup, something not tied to the system. I also swapped the SD card and ran a second cam in the sleeper cab, just in case. I've done that route 6 times since. Nothing weird, no lost time, no flickers, no blank stares, but I haven't driven that exact stretch of 29 in the middle of the night again. I time it differently now. I leave earlier or later, just in case. I was 16 when this happened, and I was obsessed with drones. I saved up for months doing lawn work to get a decent one. Nothing military grade or anything, just a DJI with a decent camera and thermal mode. I flew it almost every day after school, especially on weekends. I live in a rural area, mostly farmland, so there's a lot of open space to mess around in. I'd go out behind our property and fly it over the fields, woods, and the old irrigation canals that barely run anymore. This was in early fall, right after harvest, so the corn was all cut down and the fields looked bare. Kind of eerie when everything's just flat and brown and quiet. I remember the air felt thick that day, like it wanted to rain but never quite got there. Cloud cover was low, but solid. No sun peeking through. I went out around 5 p.m. It gets darker faster that time of year, but I still had enough light. I launched the drone from behind the barn and flew it west over Mr. Collins' property. He was fine with it. He actually liked watching the footage sometimes. His land stretches for a few miles, mostly soybean fields and some cattle farther out. No houses back there, just fence lines and those thin dirt access roads. Everything started normal. I did a few wide sweeps, got some shots of the tree lines, checked out an old windmill. Then I kicked it into thermal for fun. I liked looking for deer or coyotes in the brush. Usually you'd see little white smudges running through the fields. But it was dead quiet. No animals, no movement. That's not super rare during certain parts of the day, but it felt strange. I remember thinking it was like the whole area had emptied out. I was flying at about 400 feet when I saw something move near the top edge of the thermal feed. Just a blur at first. I switched back to regular video to try and spot it, but I couldn't see anything, just gray clouds. Then it passed through the frame again, this time clearer. It wasn't a bird, not the way it moved. It was too fast, too smooth. The shape was weird too. Narrow at the front and rounder at the back, like a teardrop or a water droplet flipped on its side. No wings, no tail. It moved perfectly horizontal, just under the cloud layer, fast but not jerky. It didn't make any sound. That was the first thing I noticed when I took off the headset and listened. Nothing. Usually, even high-flying jets have a distant roar. This thing was close enough that it should have made some kind of noise, but it was totally silent. I tried to follow it with the drone, but it was moving too fast. I adjusted the altitude and pointed the camera up more. On the screen I saw it again. just for maybe 3 seconds. Same shape, same movement. It didn't wobble or spin. It was like it was locked into some invisible rail under the clouds. I switched back to thermal. Nothing. I mean, nothing. It should have shown up. Planes and even birds give off heat. But the screen was empty. Even when I scrubbed back the footage later, there was no heat trail, no change in temperature. Like it wasn't there at all. I hovered for a while, scanning the sky. My heart was beating fast, and I was trying to tell myself it was probably a drone or some government test, something explainable, but it didn't feel right. The way it moved wasn't like anything I'd ever seen, and I'd watched hours of drone videos, military flight tests, all that. Then the drone glitched. The screen froze for about 2 seconds, then cut to static. I thought I lost connection, but the controller still said I had full bars. The feed came back, but the colors were off, washed out, almost like an old VHS. I started bringing it back manually. As it returned, I noticed the wind picking up. It had been still earlier, but now it was rustling through the grass and pushing the tops of the trees. Not a storm wind, just enough to be strange. When the drone got back over my property, I heard it again and looked up. Still no sound, but I saw that shape, barely, cutting across the sky from south to north. It was almost camouflaged. Not invisible, but blending in, like how heat waves ripple in the air. If I hadn't been looking right at it, I might have missed it. I landed the drone fast, got it shut down, then just stood there staring at the sky. My dog came around the side of the barn, barking like crazy. He's old and doesn't usually bark unless someone's at the door or a car pulls up. He didn't look up, just paced in circles and barked nonstop. The sky stayed quiet after that. Nothing else passed over and the wind settled down. Later that night, I went through the footage frame by frame. You could barely see it, just this blur moving way too smooth, too fast, and too low for any kind of normal aircraft. No sound, no lights, no heat. I showed it to my uncle the next weekend. He's a retired Air Force mechanic, and he watched the clip maybe 10 times and just said, "Huh." I never posted it anywhere. I deleted it a few weeks later. I don't know why. It just felt wrong to keep, like it wasn't meant to be recorded. I still fly the drone sometimes, but I don't fly it out over the farms anymore. Just around the yard, just where I could see it. I was driving back from my cousin's place in New Mexico, heading north toward Colorado. I'd left late, around 9:30, figuring I'd rather deal with the empty roads at night than the heat and traffic during the day. The stretch I was on cut through open desert and flat scrubland, barely lit by anything besides my headlights and the occasional distant glow from a farmhouse or small town. I'd done this drive before, and it was usually pretty relaxing. Around midnight, I was maybe an hour past Santa Rosa on a back road that eventually connects to I-25. No other cars for miles, just me and the hum of the tires. I had the windows cracked because the night air felt good, and there was a clear sky full of stars. I remember thinking it looked especially sharp that night, like the sky had more depth than usual. I stopped at a little pull-off to stretch my legs and take a leak. No streetlights out there, so the only light was the dome light inside the truck and the stars overhead. After I got out, I just stood there for a bit, leaning against the hood, letting my eyes adjust and listening to the quiet. You get a kind of stillness out there that doesn't exist in cities. No bugs, no wind, no trees rustling, just dead quiet. I noticed the stars directly above me seemed unusually bright. Not in a dramatic way, just off, like they had a sharper outline than normal. I figured maybe it was the elevation or the lack of light pollution. I watched them while I finished a bottle of water, just standing there with the truck engine ticking as it cooled. Then I noticed something weird. Some of the stars, 3 or 4 of them, were slightly out of sync with the rest of the sky. Not blinking or flashing, just moving. Barely. Slowly. I thought maybe it was my eyes playing tricks, so I looked away for a second, then back. Still there. These points of light were very subtly shifting. At first I thought maybe satellites, but they weren't crossing the sky the way satellites usually do. They weren't following a straight path. They were sort of drifting together, maintaining their distance from each other, but shifting as a group, like a constellation sliding sideways. It creeped me out a little, but I still wasn't alarmed. I figured it was just something atmospheric or maybe high-altitude aircraft reflecting light weird. I got back in the truck and kept driving. About 15 minutes later, I noticed the same cluster of lights again. I didn't remember them being in that position before. They were to my left now, a bit ahead of me, like they'd moved across the sky. And again, they were drifting slightly, still grouped tight together, still out of sync with everything else. This time I kept glancing at them as I drove. I turned down the music so I could focus. There was a low pressure in my ears, like before a storm, but the sky looked totally clear. I cracked the window wider and listened. Nothing. No wind. No bugs, no coyotes, just the road under my tires and that faint pressure in my head. After another couple miles, the lights started to fade a bit, like clouds were moving in. But I couldn't see any actual clouds. The stars around them stayed just as bright. Only the shifting ones dulled. I slowed down without really thinking, maybe down to 45. Something about the lights was bothering me now in a way I couldn't explain. I started to get the feeling I was being followed, even though they were ahead of me. I pulled over again and shut off the engine completely. I stepped out and looked straight up. The lights weren't ahead anymore. They were directly overhead. And this was the part that really unsettled me. The stars weren't moving anymore because I wasn't moving. They'd only seemed to shift because I was driving, and then they were staying exactly above me, matching my speed. When I stopped, they stopped. I stayed still for a long time, just staring. Now that I wasn't in motion, I could see it more clearly. The lights weren't separate points. They were part of something, a shape. Something massive and dark that blended perfectly with the night sky. It had no lights of its own, no outline, no sound, just that patch of sky where no stars shone except for those few dim drifting ones. I crouched down by the door, not hiding exactly, but feeling exposed. I don't know how to explain it, but I started to feel watched. Not threatened exactly, just studied. Observed. I stayed there maybe 5 or 6 minutes. The shape didn't move. No wind, no noise, just that pressure in the air and that silent shape overhead. Eventually, I forced myself back into the truck and started driving again, slowly. After about a mile, I looked up. The lights had shifted slightly again, still above me, but now angling off to the right, like they were circling away. Then they disappeared. Not gradually, just gone, like someone had turned off a projector. The pressure in my ears vanished at the same time, and I realized I could hear normal night sounds again. Crickets, wind, the faint yipping of coyotes in the distance. Everything snapped back to normal. I kept driving, faster now, not really caring about speed limits. I didn't stop again until I hit the main highway and started seeing more cars. I didn't see anything else unusual the rest of the night, but I kept checking the rear view, half expecting to see those lights again. When I finally got home, I checked the GPS history on my phone just out of curiosity. The timeline skipped over about 15 minutes between when I pulled over the second time and when I started driving again. No location logged, like the phone had been offline. I didn't notice any time I'm missing while it happened, but the gap was there. I didn't tell anyone about it for a while. I wasn't even sure what I'd seen, and I didn't want to hear the usual explanations: drones, satellites, weather balloons. I've seen all those before, and this wasn't any of them. It was big, silent, high up, but not as high as stars. It moved like it was attached to me somehow, like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. And whatever it was, it left without a trace. We weren't planning to stop. It just sort of happened. We were driving back from visiting her parents out in Boone. It was late, close to midnight, and we were coming down that long stretch of 221 before it curves south past the ridges. It's quiet up there at night. No houses, barely any lights, just empty roads and forest. You can usually see stars real clear once you get up high enough. She saw the turnout first, just a gravel patch off the road with a guardrail, one of those overlooks people pull into during the day to take photos. She asked if we could stop for a few minutes, stretch our legs. I wasn't in a hurry, so I pulled in. I cut the engine but left the battery on so we could still have the heater going. It was cold for April. Not freezing, but that kind of mountain chill that sticks in your jacket. We got out and leaned against the hood. The view was pretty good. No clouds, barely a breeze, sky full of stars. We didn't say much at first, just stood there. About 5 minutes in, she got back in the car to warm up. I stayed outside. That's when I noticed the weird feeling. Not a sound or anything, just a pressure. Like my ears were popping, except they weren't. The air felt off. Heavy, maybe? Not storm heavy, just strange. I figured maybe I needed to pop my ears, so I swallowed and yawned a few times. Didn't help. She rolled down the window and said, "Do the lights look dim to you?" I looked over. The interior dome light was on since her door hadn't shut all the way, and yeah, it looked lower than normal. Not flickering, not dying, just faint, like it was running on half power. I walked over and opened my door. The dashboard lights were dim too. The radio screen was on, but the numbers looked fuzzy, almost like a dying flashlight. I figured maybe the battery was going bad, which didn't make sense since the car was only 2 years old, but still, we'd had it in for service just a couple months back. I got in and turned the key to start the engine. Nothing. No click, no attempt, not even a starter sound. Just nothing. She looked at me and asked if the battery was dead. I didn't answer right away, I just stared at the dash. All the lights faded out completely, one by one, until the whole car went black. I tried the key again. Dead. I even popped the hood and checked the terminals. They were tight, no corrosion, the headlights wouldn't come on, the dome light was out, even the hazard lights wouldn't work. It was like the whole electrical system just shut down at the same time. While I was standing there with the hood open, I heard something weird. It was really faint at first, like the hum of an old refrigerator. I thought it might have been in my head. But she stepped out and said, "Do you hear that?" So it wasn't just me. It was low, but not from any one direction, almost like it was coming from the air itself. Not like a plane overhead or anything mechanical, just this steady vibration, like standing next to a big engine, except there wasn't anything around us. No cars on the road, no buildings, no power lines nearby. I started looking up. The stars were still out, but something felt wrong about the sky. It's hard to explain. There wasn't anything obvious to see, no lights or shapes, but there was this feeling of being watched, like something was above us and we just couldn't see it. She stood next to me, arms crossed, really quiet. Then she said, "My phone's not working." I pulled mine out. No signal, which wasn't too weird. Those mountains have dead zones, but the weird part was the screen. It lit up when I tapped it, but none of the apps would open. Just frozen. Like it was trying to work, but couldn't. I tried to restart it, but it just stayed on the shutdown screen. That hum kept going. Louder, but not in a way that made noise. It just pressed against you. Like it was in your bones. We both got back in the car, didn't say anything, just sat there. That's when I noticed the air had stopped moving. No wind, not even the usual draft you feel when the heater vents are off. The whole car felt sealed, like a vacuum. Our breaths fogged the windows, but they didn't clear. Then everything went dead silent. No bugs, no night birds, no rustle of trees, just absolute stillness, except for that low hum. We sat like that for maybe 5 minutes. It felt like longer. I didn't want to open the door again. I didn't want to look up anymore. I just stared at the dash, hands on the wheel like I was waiting at a red light. Then it all stopped. No build-up, no fade-out, just gone. The hum, the pressure, the weird air. The dome light blinked back on by itself. The dash lit up. Her phone vibrated on the console. I turned the key. The engine started like nothing was wrong. We didn't talk the rest of the way home. Not a word. Not until we pulled into the driveway and she finally said, "I don't want to go back there." I nodded. I didn't either. The next morning, I checked the battery with a multimeter. Full charge, clean terminals. I drove the car all week. No issues. I even checked for recalls. Nothing. I didn't mention it to anyone else. Not because I was afraid they'd think I was crazy. I just didn't know how to explain it. We never did go back up that road at night. Even when we took trips out that way, we stuck to the lower routes. I still wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed longer, or gotten out again, or looked straight up. It was a little after 9 when I left the house. I remember because I checked the oven clock while grabbing the leash. I always walk max around the same time, just a short loop around the edge of the neighborhood, past the field behind the old elementary school. That time of night is quiet. No traffic, no kids, just streetlights and crickets. Max is a husky mix, getting older now, but still sharp. He's picky about smells, hates puddles, and barks at trash cans if they're in a new spot. So, when he acted weird that night, I noticed right away. We cut across the back lot like always, between two fences that open up to a big field behind the school. There's this little paved path that runs along the edge, sort of half sidewalk, half service road. It's not lit, but the moon was out, so visibility wasn't bad. Everything had that pale blue-gray look. Max trotted ahead, leash loose, sniffing along the grass like normal. We were maybe 50 feet into the field when he stopped. Not suddenly, more like he slowed, lowered his head, and just locked up. Tail stiff, ears forward. I thought maybe he'd seen a rabbit or raccoon. I followed his gaze out toward the center of the field. At first, I didn't see anything, just grass and the soft line of the trees at the far edge. Then something moved, or at least I thought it moved. It wasn't a thing, exactly. More like the air moved. A patch of it, hanging maybe 10 feet off the ground just above the field. It looked like a shimmer, like heat off pavement in summer. But it was cooler out, maybe 50 degrees, and there was no source for that kind of distortion. It wasn't wide, maybe the size of a car, and it was almost still. Just this faint ripple like glass underwater. I blinked, and it was gone. I mean, completely gone. No fade out, no drift. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. Just empty space. Same trees, same moonlight, no shimmer. Max still wouldn't move. I tugged the leash gently, then harder. Nothing. His front legs were locked, not growling, not whining, just tense and stuck. I crouched down to check his paws, thought maybe he'd stepped on something. He hadn't. I stood up and looked back at the field, still empty. But I had that feeling like something was watching. I don't get that often, and I've walked that trail hundreds of times. This was different. My skin felt tight, and my ears were picking up every sound. Wind in the leaves, my own breathing, the tiny shuffle of Max shifting his weight. I turned us around. He followed, but he kept glancing back over his shoulder. We moved slow at first, then quicker. I remember thinking I was being paranoid, that I'd just seen some trick of light, and Max was reacting to me being jumpy. But the weird thing is, when we got back into the neighborhood, right where the field ends and the sidewalk starts, Max pulled to go home. Not like he was tired, like he wanted the door shut behind him. When we got back, I poured a glass of water and sat on the couch trying to shake the nerves off. Max paced for a bit, then settled near the front door, facing it. He usually lies near the couch, but not that night. Around 10:30, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just this dull pop, like when you open a tightly sealed jar. Then a faint buzz, high-pitched and short, like electronics powering on. Max stood up immediately and stared at the front window. I walked over and looked through the blinds. Nothing. I stepped outside and stood on the porch. The street was empty. A couple porch lights were on, but I didn't see any people, no cars. Still quiet. The sound didn't come back. Max didn't follow me out, though. He stood just inside the doorway, ears back. I went back in, shut the door, and that was it for the night. The next morning, I took Max out early. He was fine, back to normal, nose to the ground, pulling ahead a little. I figured maybe I'd just freaked myself out the night before. But when we passed the fence again, where the trail opens to the field, he stopped, wouldn't go in. I tried coaxing him, but he dug his feet in. He wasn't barking or whining, he just wasn't going. His eyes were fixed on the same spot in the field where I'd seen the shimmer. Nothing was there, just dew on the grass and morning light. We went around the long way. That afternoon, I went back alone, just to check. I stood at the edge of the field and looked toward where I'd seen it. I stayed for maybe 15 minutes. Nothing happened. I was about to leave when I noticed something strange. A patch of the grass, right where the shimmer had been. It looked flattened. Not trampled, not like someone had walked through, just sort of pressed down in a wide, shallow dip, like something had hovered there and pushed the grass down evenly. It wasn't circular, just kind of an irregular oval. No burnt grass, no footprints, no tire marks. I crouched and ran my hand over it. The blades weren't snapped or broken, just flattened, like they'd grown that way. The soil underneath was dry and smooth. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was afraid they'd think I was crazy, just because I didn't know what to say. It wasn't dramatic enough to make a big deal out of, but it also wasn't something I could explain. For the next few weeks, I avoided that field. Max wouldn't go near it anyway. Even if we crossed to the other side of the street, he'd pull toward home. Then one night, maybe 2 weeks later, I was outside again taking the trash out. It was just after 9. Quiet. Moon out. While I was wheeling the bin to the curb, I heard that sound again. That pop. Not loud, just like pressure releasing. I turned, looked up. Nothing. But then came the buzz. Same tone, same duration, like a single high-pitched pulse. It felt it pass through me, not like sound, more like a brief vibration behind the eyes. Max barked from inside. Just once. I turned back, walked inside, locked the door. That time, I didn't go check the window. I just sat down, turned on the TV, and left it running until midnight. Nothing's happened since. Max still won't walk near that part of the field. I've started taking a different route entirely. Adds 10 minutes to the walk, but I don't mind. He seems better that way. Sometimes, if I'm out late, I'll hear the wind pick up fast for no reason, just for a second. Then nothing. I'll check the trees, check the sky, never see anything. But I always look. It was a Thursday morning, early September. I remember that because we'd had a string of hot days and finally got a cool front that rolled in overnight. I got up around 6, same as always, made coffee, fed the dogs, and headed out to check the pasture before starting on the fencing repair I'd been putting off. We've got about 40 acres, mostly pasture, some woods near the south end, and it's just me and my wife out here. She was in town visiting her sister that week, so I was by myself. I noticed it right away, maybe 50 yards from the back gate. A square, perfectly square, burned into the grass. It was probably 10 feet by 10 feet. Sharp corners, straight lines. The grass inside it was brittle, dead looking, not blackened or charred, just dry, like it had been microwaved. Outside the square, everything was normal, green, soft, dew-covered. But inside that square, it looked like mid-July after a month of no rain. I walked around it twice. No tracks, no tire marks, no footprints. I bent down and touched the grass. It crumbled under my fingers. Not ashes, just dead. And there was this smell, like ozone, or static. I don't know how to describe it exactly, almost metallic. Not strong, but it lingered. I looked up. Clear sky. No sign of a storm. We hadn't had lightning. I would have heard it, and the dogs would have raised hell. I went back to the barn, grabbed a shovel, and tried to dig up a bit of the dirt from the middle. It came up dry, and we guessed, but not scorched. No heat, no soot. Just dry soil. Almost powdery. I figured maybe a crop duster dumped something by accident, but we don't get planes out here often, and there wasn't any residue or chemical smell. Just that faint ozone scent. Later that day, I told my neighbor Joe about it. He's got land just west of ours, and he came by to look. He stood there a while, chewing on a toothpick, then asked if I'd been burning anything. I told him no. He kicked at the edge of the square with his boot, then shrugged and said it was probably kids with a drone and some kind of prank. But it wasn't just the square that got to me. That night, around 2 a.m., the dogs started whining. Not barking, whining. I got up, checked the back porch. They were both standing at the door, ears back, tails down. Usually they bark at anything that moves, raccoons, coyotes, wind. But they just stood there, quiet, eyes on the field. I stepped outside and listened. Nothing. No wind, no bugs, no distant trucks. Just silence, the kind that feels heavy. I didn't have a flashlight on me, but the moon was bright enough to see. I looked out toward the pasture. That square was still there, just darker now in the moonlight. Nothing moved. I waited maybe 5 minutes, then went back inside. The dogs followed and curled up under the kitchen table. Next morning, I checked again. Still there. Still dry. I brought a camera out and took a few pictures, but they didn't show much, just a brown square in the grass. Nothing weird unless you already knew what to look for. That day, I noticed something else. My phone battery died by noon. It was at 80% in the morning. I hadn't used it except to check the time and take those pictures. I plugged it in, but it charged slower than usual. The wall clock in the kitchen was 10 minutes off, too. Thought maybe the battery was low, but it was fine when I checked it. That night, I brought a lawn chair out to the edge of the pasture, just to see if anything happened. Around 10, I started seeing small lights, way off in the distance, moving low to the ground. Not headlights, no roads out that direction. Just pasture and woods. They weren't bright. just little pulses, like someone flicking a lighter over and over. But they moved, side to side, up and down. Too smooth to be people walking with flashlights. No sound. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes before they faded. Dogs didn't bark. Whole time, they just sat at the fence, staring. 2 days later, the square was still there. The grass hadn't changed, still brittle, still dry, but the area around it started to look different. I don't know how to explain it, just a subtle shift. The grass outside the square grew faster than usual, greener, healthier, like the soil got a boost, but inside, it stayed dead. I brought out a moisture meter I use for the hayfields. Readings inside the square were low, almost zero. Just outside the square, normal, even a little higher than normal in some spots. That afternoon, while I was out walking the fence line, I heard a hum. Not loud. Low, almost like a diesel engine idling far off, but steady. I turned expecting to see a truck, but there was nothing. No dust trails, no headlights. I stood still for a minute, and the hum just stopped, like someone flipped a switch. When I got back to the barn, the power was out. Only for a few seconds, but it flicked off and on. The radio reset, the electric fence controller blinked like it had lost connection. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was outside. I kept getting up, checking the windows. Nothing, but the dogs paced, back and forth. No barking, just pacing. Around 3 a.m., I looked out the bedroom window and saw the square glowing. Not bright, just a soft, faint shimmer, like heat rising off pavement again, but steadier. I went out onto the porch with my flashlight. When I shined it on the square, the shimmer stopped. Grass still looked the same. I walked out to it, slow. Dogs stayed back at the house. I crouched down, touched the dirt again. Still dry, but the air felt warmer over it. Not hot, just a few degrees different, like standing near a heating vent. I stayed there for a while, just listening. Again, nothing. No wind, no bugs, just quiet. Next morning, the shimmer was gone. No trace of it. But now the square looked cleaner, like something had sucked the moisture and color out completely. I left it alone after that. Stopped walking the dogs near it. Stopped talking about it. A week later, it rained. Good, steady rain all afternoon. Everywhere on the property got soaked, except that square. I went out after the storm passed and checked. The ground around it was muddy, grass wet, but inside the square, dry as ever. The grass still hasn't grown back. It's been months. Sometimes at night I still hear that hum, just for a few seconds, then gone. I don't go out when I hear it. Neither do the dogs. We just wait. Then it stops. I've never seen anything leave tracks. Nothing flies overhead, but that square is still out there, and it's not fading. We were about 4 miles in when the sun started going down. Not a big deal. We had headlamps, and the trail was easy to follow. It was one of those wide, pine-lined ridges with almost no undergrowth, and the dirt was dry and packed. Pretty quiet, too, except for wind in the trees and our footsteps. We weren't even talking much by that point, just kind of settling into that tired rhythm where you stop making conversation and just walk. It was me and Ryan. He was ahead, maybe 10 feet or so. I kept checking the GPS because I thought we'd already passed the spot where the trail split. It hadn't shown up yet, and we didn't want to miss it and add another hour to the hike back. Anyway, I was looking down at the screen when I heard this sound that made me stop. It wasn't loud, just strange, like a crackle or a static pop. At first I thought it was my headlamp. It had flickered once earlier, so I thought maybe the battery was going. But when I looked up, Ryan had stopped too, and he was looking around with this weird look on his face. "You hear that?" he said. "Yeah." It sounded again, like static, but not coming from any direction I could pinpoint. It wasn't behind us or ahead, it was above. Not loud, but close somehow, like it was just out of reach. A pulsing hiss, but with weird little breaks in it, like fragments. Almost like someone trying to tune a radio that wouldn't lock onto a signal. There was a rhythm to it, too, not random. We stood there listening for a while. The sound came and went, never staying more than a few seconds, but each time it came back, it was slightly different. Higher pitched, then lower. Sometimes fast, then slower. Not like wind or branches creaking. Definitely not animals. After maybe a minute, Ryan said, "You think that's some kind of comms interference?" I didn't answer. I was staring up at the sky, which was this deep blue now. darker near the tree line. I didn't see anything. No planes, no flashes, but the sound was still coming, like it was dropping down through the air in waves. We kept going, not talking much. The trail dipped into a shallow ravine and came back up, and the sound stopped for a while. We figured maybe it was gone. But then, as we got near this little clearing, it started again, louder this time, and clearer. It actually made us both freeze. It wasn't just static anymore. There were these little stutters mixed in, like syllables, or something trying to be syllables. I wouldn't call it words, not really. But it wasn't just noise. The cadence was too intentional, like something trying to imitate speech but missing a layer, like hearing a voice through water or inside your own head. We didn't say anything, just stood there, watching the trees. Then Ryan looked up again, slowly, and I followed his gaze. There was nothing in the sky, no movement, no color. Just stars starting to show through, scattered and faint. But the sound was still above us. I held my breath and listened harder. The hissing faded a little, but then it changed direction, as if something drifted a few feet to the side. There was no wind, no shift in the air, but the sound moved. Ryan muttered something like, "Screw this," and picked up pace. I followed, glancing over my shoulder more than I usually would. There was no real reason to be scared, but it didn't feel right. The forest didn't feel empty anymore. The trees were too still, too sharp in the dark, like everything was holding its breath. We hit the split in the trail about 10 minutes later, and by then we were both fully in headlamp mode, not talking. The sound had mostly stopped, just a faint clicking now and then like dry leaves underfoot, but not from our feet. It came from off to the right. We didn't go that way. We stuck to the main loop, picked up our pace. Ryan kept checking over his shoulder, and I could tell he was trying not to freak himself out. He's not the type to spook easy. Used to do solo hikes, even overnight ones, but something about this had him rattled. I could feel it off him. About 20 minutes later, when we were nearing the parking area, I noticed something strange about the headlamp beam. Mine was flickering faintly. Just a little. Not dying, more like something was interfering. Ryan's did the same thing. They'd both been fully charged. Then, right before we came around the last bend, the sound came back one last time, louder than ever, like a burst. It was overhead again, and I swear I felt something like pressure in the air, just for a second. Not heat or cold, just weight. A hum behind my eyes. It didn't last long, maybe 2 seconds, 3. Then gone. We came around the last turn, and the lot was there empty, except for Ryan's car. Everything felt normal again. Bugs were buzzing, air was cool and still. Our lamps stopped flickering. We didn't say much during the drive back. Ryan just had this blank look, both hands on the wheel, not even playing music like he usually did. I don't know if he was trying to make sense of it or just forget it. Probably both. Later that night, I checked my phone. I'd left the GPS app running by accident, and it had tracked our route. Everything looked fine, except for one weird thing. Right around the spot where we heard the loudest burst, there was this tiny detour in the path. Not even a full loop, just a short, curved drift like we'd stepped off trail for a few seconds and come back. Neither of us remembered doing that. There were no side paths there, and our footprints had stayed single file the whole way. I texted Ryan about it. He didn't reply for 2 days. When he did, all he said was, "Let's not go back to that one." We didn't. I work as a meteorologist at a small regional weather center. It's mostly the kind of job where you're looking at numbers and screens, waiting for storms or fronts to show up, and then tracking them as they move. Nothing fancy usually, just routine stuff. But a few months ago, something happened that I still can't explain. It started late one evening, just before my shift ended. I was watching the radar for any signs of storms moving through our area. Around that time, the radar screen showed this huge, slow-moving mass just south of the city. It was strange, because it wasn't like any weather pattern I'd ever seen before. It looked almost solid, like a big blob moving across the radar at low altitude. But the weird part was that it didn't match anything on the satellite images. I pulled up the satellite view expecting to see clouds or some kind of disturbance. Nothing, just clear skies. The radar kept showing this shape moving steadily across the region, but it wasn't changing shape like a cloud, or storm would. It was more like a solid shadow or an object. I thought maybe the radar was malfunctioning, so I checked the system diagnostics. Everything looked normal, no errors or interference reports. I also called a colleague who was working a few towns over to see if their radar showed the same thing. He said, yeah, his radar picked up the same mass moving across his screen, same size and speed. That made it even weirder. Two separate radar stations showing the same thing, but nothing on satellite or any reports of anything unusual on the ground. I tried to see if there were any planes or helicopters in the area, thinking maybe some low-flying aircraft could cause the radar return. The flight tracker app showed no aircraft in that part of the sky at that time. The radar signature moved slowly, almost like something drifting, not flying fast like a plane. The speed was maybe 10 to 15 miles per hour, which would be slow for any aircraft. I kept watching it for the next half hour. It moved from south to north, cutting across several counties. No rain, no clouds, just this dark patch on radar. I started checking local reports, emergency channels, social media, anything that might explain it. No reports of any strange lights, objects, or phenomena. The local news stations weren't covering anything unusual. At one point, I went outside to look up at the sky. It was a clear night, stars visible, no moon. The air was cool and still, nothing to see, no lights, no sounds, just silence. I went back inside, stared at the radar. The shape kept moving, then eventually started fading away as it reached the northern edge of the radar's range. After the shift, I drove home along the same route the radar showed that shape traveling. I figured if there was something out there, maybe I'd catch a glimpse. But everything was normal. The roads were empty, the fields quiet, no lights in the sky, no unusual noises. That night, I kept thinking about the radar image. It didn't fit any explanation I could come up with. No storms, no aircraft, no natural weather patterns. The next day, I brought it up with my supervisor. He suggested maybe it was some kind of radar glitch or interference from a passing object like a satellite or space debris. I tried to check that. The satellite data didn't show any debris or anomalies in orbit at that time. And if it was interference, it was odd that two different radar stations showed the same thing at the same time. Over the next few days, I watched the radar carefully, hoping to see the same phenomenon again. Nothing. No more blobs, no strange masses. But a few weeks later, I noticed something else odd. The radar started showing brief, faint signals in the same general area around the same time of night. These signals weren't as clear or big as before, more like flickers or blips that lasted for just seconds. At first, I thought maybe some birds or insects were causing it, but the timing was strange. It always happened after midnight, moving slowly across the sky, always in roughly the same path as that big mass before. I asked around. Nobody else had noticed anything, or if they did, they weren't saying. One night, I stayed late after my shift to watch the radar. The flickers started again, small, quick flashes moving across the screen. I stepped outside to see if I could hear or see anything. The air was dead quiet, no wind, no distant traffic. I looked up but saw nothing but stars. Then I noticed a faint glow on the horizon, a dull, shifting light low to the north. It wasn't bright, more like a faint haze that appeared and disappeared. I tried to take a photo with my phone, but the camera couldn't pick up anything beyond the darkness. I stayed outside for maybe 20 minutes, watching the light fade away and the flickers disappear from the radar. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was being watched, but when I looked around, nothing was there. That feeling didn't go away easily. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something following me, but there was only the quiet night. After that, I didn't mention it at work. I didn't want anyone to think I was losing it or messing with the data. A few times since then, I've checked the radar at night and noticed those flickers again, the same slow, low signals moving in that same path. I still don't know what caused the big mass or the flickers. No one else I know has seen anything like it, and I've never found any reports or explanations. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just seeing glitches or misreading the instruments, but the data was there on the screens, consistent and real. Whatever it was, it passed through my area like a shadow, something moving close to the ground but invisible to any camera or eye. I'm not sure what to make of it. Just a strange pattern on the radar, a quiet night, and the feeling that something was there, just beyond sight. I was out on the lake early one morning, trying to get some fishing done before the heat kicked in. It was just me, my small boat, and the usual quiet you get before the world wakes up. The water was calm, the sky mostly clear with just a few clouds drifting east. I'd been out there a couple hours already, and honestly, it was a pretty slow morning. No bites, no movement besides the occasional ripple from the wind. That's when I noticed it. The wind just stopped. Not a breeze, not a shift, just dead still. The water flattened out like glass, which was weird because there had been a steady breeze coming across the lake for the last couple hours. It didn't make sense for it to just cut out like that, especially so suddenly. I looked around, kind of expecting something to explain it, but nothing. No storm clouds, no distant thunder, no planes or anything like that. Just this strange, heavy silence. Then I saw the birds. Normally in the morning, they're scattered all over, perching, flying in different directions, chasing bugs. But now every single bird in the area was circling tight, real tight, like they were stuck in this weird spiral right above the water. I mean, I counted at least 20, maybe 30 of them, all swirling like they were drawn to some invisible center. I stared up, and that's when I noticed the shape. It was dark, like a big blotch in the sky, but it wasn't like a cloud. It was hazy, sort of like smoke, but without any smell or movement. The weird part was that it didn't reflect any light. You know how even clouds catch sunlight and glow a little on the edges? This thing didn't. It just sat there, a flat, dark mass against the sky, and it didn't cast a shadow on the water below. I kept squinting, trying to figure out what it was. At first, I thought maybe it was just a trick of the light, or some kind of shadow from a big storm far off, but the rest of the sky was bright and clear. The sun was just coming up behind it, and the light seemed to pass right through the edges without changing the shape or color. The birds kept circling, tighter and tighter. Their calls were all around me now, sharp, frantic, but there was no panic in them, more like they were stuck in a pattern they couldn't break. I tried to get my phone out to record it, but as soon as I touched it, the screen flickered and went black. Battery dead, which was weird because I'd charged it fully the night before. I pulled it out again, but nothing. No amount of pressing the power button brought it back on. I was still staring up at that shape when I noticed another thing. No insects. Usually, on warm mornings by the water, you get bugs buzzing or landing on your skin. But there was nothing. No mosquitoes, no flies, nothing. I figured maybe I was just out in the middle of a patch with fewer bugs, so I looked down at the water. Even the usual birds that skim the surface weren't moving in or out of the lake. It was like everything had stopped except those circling birds. I started to feel kind of uneasy, but tried to keep it together. I'd been on the lake plenty of times and seen weird weather and bird behavior before. Still, this was different. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or freak myself out. After maybe 10 minutes, the shape didn't move. It just stayed there, hanging in the sky like a bruise. The birds kept circling and the wind was still gone. Then, gradually, the birds began to break formation, peeling off one by one. The wind started to pick up again, barely at first, and the water rippled back to life. I watched the dark shape as the breeze grew, and then it started to fade, like someone turned down a dimmer switch. It dissolved slowly into nothing, the edges blurring until it was gone. The birds scattered, flying off in different directions, and the air smelled normal again. I checked my phone, and after a minute, it finally came back on. Battery at 10%, which was strange because it had been fully charged hours earlier. I didn't catch a picture or video. My hands were shaking too much, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to focus on. I packed up and started heading back to shore, feeling the normal sounds and smells of the morning return. The rest of the day, I kept thinking about what I saw. When I told a friend who fishes a lot, he said maybe it was some kind of weather phenomenon or a shadow from a plane or drone, but nothing he'd ever heard of acted like that. Completely black, no shadow, no reflection, and birds reacting like that. A couple nights later, I told my brother about it, and he asked if I'd been dreaming or had any drinks before I went out. I hadn't. I just know what I saw was real, but I don't know what it was. I checked the weather reports for that day and the following days. No storms, no atmospheric anomalies. Nothing that matched what I saw in the lake. Sometimes when I'm out fishing now, I keep an eye on the sky, but I haven't seen anything like that since. The birds act normal again. The wind blows like it's supposed to. But every so often, especially on still mornings, I find myself looking up, half expecting that dark shape to show up again, circling above the water, quiet and impossible to explain. I woke up in the middle of the night to this low, humming noise. It wasn't loud or sharp, just this steady, deep vibration that seemed to fill the whole room. At first, I thought it was something outside, maybe the heater or a truck idling nearby, but nothing like that ever made a sound like this. It was different. I lay there for a few minutes, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The humming didn't change or stop. It was almost like a constant pulse, but slower than a heartbeat. I wasn't really sure how to describe it, kind of unsettling. Then I noticed this red light coming through the gap in my curtains. It wasn't bright like a streetlight or a car. It was more like a glow, pulsing softly. It changed in intensity every few seconds, like it was breathing or alive in some way. I sat up and stared at the window. Outside, the street was empty and quiet. No cars parked, no flashing lights from neighbors or anything normal like that. The red glow was coming from the woods behind the house, just beyond the edge of the yard. It wasn't from any street lamp or nearby building because those were farther down and had a yellowish light. I got out of bed and crept over to the window, pulling back the curtain a little more. The glow was bigger than before, still pulsing. It wasn't moving, just staying in the same spot, maybe 30 or 40 yards out. I pulled out my phone to record it. I figured maybe it was something strange, but explainable, like some kind of equipment or a weird reflection. When I unlocked it, the battery icon was flashing empty. Dead. That made no sense because I'd charged it all evening and barely used it before bed. I even tried plugging it into the charger, but nothing happened. The screen stayed black. I stood there for a minute, phone in hand, feeling weird. The humming got louder, or at least it felt louder in the silence of the night. It didn't sound mechanical, more like a deep tone, but not one I'd ever heard before. I wanted to tell my parents, but I didn't want to wake them up. They'd just tell me to go back to sleep. So I just watched the red light, hoping it'd go away or change. After maybe 10 minutes, the light started to fade, getting dimmer and slower, like it was going to disappear. The humming faded too, almost like it was leaving with the glow. I felt kind of stupid for staying up so late over some weird noise and light. I went back to bed and tried to fall asleep, but I kept hearing that low vibration in my ears. It wasn't really loud, but it was there, like a background noise I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I told my mom about it over breakfast. She said maybe it was a drone or some kind of power line issue. I thought about that, but the woods behind our house don't have power lines, and the glow didn't look like any drone lights I'd seen before. I went back outside to the spot where the light had been. Nothing was there. No marks on the grass, no strange smells, nothing unusual, just the normal trees and some rocks. I checked my phone again. It turned on fine and showed a full charge. I don't get it. A few nights later, the humming came back, but this time it was quieter and shorter, short like a distant vibration. No red light, just the sound fading into the night. Since then, I haven't heard the humming or seen anything strange. But sometimes, when it's quiet, I swear I feel like something's watching from the woods. I can't explain it, and I don't know if I'm imagining things or if something was really out there that night. Whatever it was, it didn't leave any answers. Just that strange glow, the hum, and my dead phone battery. The power went out around 9:15. I remember the time because I had just paused a movie and stood up to get a drink when everything clicked off. TV, kitchen lights, even the fridge hum stopped. It wasn't just my place. I looked out the window and the whole block was dark. Porch lights, street lamps, houses across the road, nothing. It wasn't storming. No wind, no rain, just a normal September night. Warm, kind of still. I figured it was a transformer issue or a scheduled outage nobody warned us about. I stepped outside to see if anyone else was out, maybe checking breakers or calling the utility company. My neighbor, Steve, was already standing in his driveway in pajama pants, smoking. He saw me and gave a little shrug, like, "What now?" A couple other people came out onto their porches too. You could hear confused voices up and down the street, but it wasn't loud. More like everyone was half waiting for the power to flicker back on so we could just go back inside and forget it. I stood on the sidewalk, sipping my beer, kind of zoning out. The stars were actually visible for once with all the lights off. It was almost nice, weirdly quiet. Then everything got quieter. It's hard to explain, but the background sounds, the bugs, the distant highway hum, whatever slight breeze there'd been, all just seemed to stop at once. Not like something loud drowned them out, more like they left, like the whole area hit mute. Steve noticed it too. He lowered his cigarette and turned toward me, brows raised. "You hear that?" he asked. But there was nothing to hear. I looked up, kind of instinctively, and saw it. There was this shape hanging in the sky, maybe 200 feet up, maybe more. It wasn't a drone, too big, way too still. And it wasn't a plane, no sound, no blinking lights, no movement, just this glow. It wasn't bright like a spotlight, more like the way a screen lights up a dark room. Soft but obvious, oval-shaped, yellowish white. Not quite a disc, not a perfect circle either. Hard to pin down. Like the edges didn't stay still, almost like heat waves around it, but not quite. You could look at it, but it didn't feel right to. No one said anything for a few seconds. I think we were all processing it separately. Then a voice, someone farther down the block, goes, "What the hell is that?" And the quiet kind of cracked. A few more people started coming outside, pointing. Phones were out, no signal, no power. Some were trying to take photos, but I don't think any of them turned out. I tried too, but my screen just showed black, like it wasn't picking up the light at all. It didn't move, not an inch. It just hovered, completely silent, directly over the middle of town. Not over our street specifically, more like the center. Probably a couple blocks south of us, judging by the angle. I stepped into the road for a better view. Steve joined me. We just stood there, staring up. 3 minutes. That's how long it lasted, give or take. I didn't count, but someone said later they'd timed it. At one point, a dog barked. Just once, sharp and loud, like it had been holding its breath too. Then quiet again. The object didn't rotate or flash or do anything dramatic. It just was there, glowing steadily. No sound, no wind, no hum. Even the air felt too still. The temperature didn't change, but I remember feeling my arms get cold anyway, and then it blinked out. Not like it flew away, not like it sped up and vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone, like turn off a light. No fade, no trail, just gone. About 5 seconds later, the power came back on. The streetlights clicked, porch bulbs lit up, the fridge in my house made that weird startup rattle. Everyone just kind of looked at each other. Nobody said much. A few people started laughing, but it wasn't funny. It was that awkward, nervous kind of laugh, like you're trying to shake something off. I went inside. Steve stood out there a little longer, but we didn't talk again that night. The next day, I thought maybe I'd see something online, other people reporting it, maybe a news article, maybe some official explanation. But there was barely anything, just a couple local posts saying there was a brief outage, likely due to a grid fault. Nobody mentioned the light. I called my cousin, who lives on the east end of town, to see if she'd seen it too. She said her power had gone out, but she hadn't gone outside. She didn't notice anything weird. I walked down to the hardware store that afternoon, and the guy at the register, Nick, I think, asked if my place had lost power too. I said yeah, and asked if he'd seen anything strange. He looked at me kind of funny and asked what I meant. When I said the thing in the sky, he just frowned and said, "What thing?" I dropped it. Later that week, I brought it up with Steve. He didn't want to talk about it at first. Just shook his head and said, "Don't think about it too much." I still don't really know what I saw. I know it was there, and I know it wasn't just me. There were a dozen people on that street who saw it too. But nobody talks about it now. Like it didn't happen, or like they don't want to admit it did. I went out hunting that weekend like I usually do. It's what I do every fall, just me in the woods. I pack up my gear Friday night, head out early Saturday morning, and spend most of the day walking trails, checking spots. I'm not some expert or anything, just someone who likes being alone in the forest, watching and waiting. That year, I'd set up a handful of trail cameras in spots where I thought game might pass. Nothing fancy, just cheap motion activated ones strapped to trees. I like to look back at the footage later, see what's been around. It's not about trophies, just knowing what's out there. Usually it's deer, raccoons, sometimes the odd coyote or bobcat. The weekend went normal at first. I hiked in early, double-checked the cameras. Everything seemed fine. I took some shots, moved a few trail markers, that sort of thing. But when I got home and plugged the cameras into my laptop, things got weird. 4 of the cameras were completely wiped clean. No videos, no pictures, just empty files. I've never seen that happen before. Usually, if a card messes up, it'll say corrupted or won't load at all. But these just showed blank folders, like they never recorded anything. The weird part was the last camera, the one near a small clearing I'd set up near some old logging trails. Its files didn't show any footage either, but when I ran a recovery program, it pulled out one corrupted frame. Just a single photo, and it looked messed up at first, but I could still make out what was in it. There was this tall, dark figure standing right between 2 trees. It had no face, or at least nothing you could identify as a face. Just smooth, dark where a face should be, like a shadow stretched out and frozen. The shape was too upright to be a deer or anything normal, and it was too still. No blur, no movement at all. The photo had been taken just after dawn, with the sun barely coming up. The light was soft, and you could see the outline of the trees around it clearly. But that figure stood out like it was absorbing all the light. I stared at that photo for a long time. Tried to convince myself it was a trick of the camera, a bad pixel cluster, a weird shadow, or even a bird flying by and catching the lens at the wrong moment. But the shape was just there. The next weekend, I went back out to the same spot. I wanted to see if I could find anything else, maybe catch something on a new camera. When I got there, the clearing looked normal, except for the trail camera itself. It was still hanging from the tree, but the SD card was missing. I thought maybe someone had come along and stolen it, maybe thinking it was worth something. But the spot is pretty remote, and there's no real reason anyone would be there at that time. I spent hours checking the area, calling out sometimes, but no one answered. No other signs. The forest was quiet, way quieter than usual. Usually you'd hear birds, squirrels, wind through the leaves, but that day, it felt dead. On my way out, I took one last look back at the clearing. For a moment, I thought I saw something move between the trees, like a shadow shifting. I stopped and squinted, but nothing was there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the photo, about how those other cameras had wiped themselves clean. And that silent figure, just standing there, watching. I decided to set up one more camera in the same spot, but this time, I left it running overnight. I didn't want to be out there after dark, but I needed to know if anything showed up again. The next morning, I went back with my gear and my dog. The camera was still there, with a card inside. I plugged it into my laptop at home, expecting more weirdness. Nothing. No pictures, no videos. The folder was empty again. I went back and checked the camera. It was set to record motion, with night vision, all normal. But when I looked closer, the lens had tiny scratches all over it, like someone or something had tried to wipe it clean or cover it up. I checked the rest of my equipment, but no signs of tampering anywhere else. Just that one camera. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about it. I went back to the clearing a few more times, each time feeling like I was being watched. Every time, there was this heavy silence that pressed down on me. My dog didn't like it either. He'd growl at the trees and refuse to go near the clearing. One evening, I stayed a little later than usual. The sun was setting fast and the woods were turning dark. I was packing up when I caught a flash of something between the trees, low and quick. I spun around, heart racing, but all I saw was empty space. I heard a faint noise, not a sound I could place exactly, like a soft hum or a vibration in the air. I called my dog and we hurried back to the truck. When I got home, I noticed my phone was dead. Battery was fine in the morning, but now it wouldn't turn on. Same with my old walkie-talkie I usually take with me. Nothing. That's when it hit me. Every time I'd gone near that clearing, something electronic around me stopped working or got messed up. Cameras wiped clean, scratched lenses, dead batteries. I don't know what to make of it. I keep thinking about that one photo, the tall, faceless shape standing there in the dawn light. The way it didn't move, didn't blink, didn't do anything, just watched. I told a few friends about it, but no one had seen anything like that. Some thought maybe it was some prank or a weird animal. Maybe. But no animal I know stands still like that, or makes electronics die. I haven't gone back since that last night, and I probably won't. Still, sometimes when I'm alone, I swear I hear that same faint hum in the distance, or see shadows where they don't belong. I don't know what I saw, or why those cameras got wiped. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. I was out on the lake later than I should have been. I'd been fishing most of the afternoon and lost track of time, and by the time I realized how dark it was getting, I was already halfway across the south stretch, too far from the dock to make it back before full dark. No cell service out there. I figured I'd take my time, head in slow. The motor was acting up anyway, sputtering a bit, so I didn't want to push it. The lake's not huge, about 2 miles long, one across, but it's deep in the middle, way deeper than people expect. It's shaped kind of like a spoon, wide and rounded at one end, narrow at the other, with a bunch of little inlets on the eastern side where the land dips down into rocky coves. I was maybe 100 yards off one of those when I noticed something strange with the water. It started subtle. I was facing north, with the bow pointed toward the dock, and about 50 feet ahead, the surface just flattened, like someone had thrown a sheet of glass down over the water. No ripples, no wind, just this dead smooth patch that stretched out in front of me and slowly widened. I let the motor idle and stood up, trying to see if it was oil or pollen or something slick floating on top. But it wasn't that. It wasn't something on the water. It was the water itself. Then it started to move. Not fast, just this gentle, slow shift, like something big was passing underneath and pushing the surface aside without making a wake. The smooth patch widened ahead and started to curve slightly as it moved to the right toward the deeper middle section. No sound, no splashes. I thought maybe it was a submerged log drifting just under the surface, but I didn't see anything break the water. No dark shape, no color change. Just the movement. It was like watching a hand slide under a blanket. I killed the motor completely and let the boat drift. The night was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. No bugs, no birds. Just the boat creaking softly and that patch of still water gliding past. The air felt weird. Not cold exactly, just heavy, like before a thunderstorm. I watched the path extend about 60, maybe 70 feet to my right, then curve back and disappear into the darker section of the lake. The water behind it returned to normal, little waves picking up again like nothing happened. I sat back down and picked up my oar. The motor was dead now, wouldn't even cough. So I started paddling, keeping an eye on the spot where the smooth water had gone. A few minutes later, I heard a deep thunk under the boat. Not sharp, more like a soft impact, as if something had nudged the hull. I froze, waited, listening. Nothing followed. I dipped the oar in again and kept paddling. Then it happened again, slightly stronger. It wasn't a rock. I was in open water. It felt deliberate, like something was bumping from beneath. I set the oar down and leaned over the edge with my flashlight. The beam only went a few feet down, too murky to see much, but I thought I caught a glimpse of something pale, just for a second, like skin. Smooth, then gone. I backed away from the edge and sat down again. The boat rocked slightly, but not from anything I did. Just a small, delayed push. I didn't know what to do. The shoreline was too far to swim, and I wasn't sure which direction to paddle anymore. The GPS on my phone wouldn't load, just that little spinning circle. I turned the flashlight off to save the battery and just sat there. That was the worst part. The sitting. Then I heard the water move. Not a splash, more like a slow slosh, like someone shifting in a bathtub. It came from behind me, and I turned fast, scanning the surface. Still nothing. Just faint moonlight and the boat's gentle bobbing. I paddled again, this time not caring which way, just moving. After maybe 20 or 30 yards, I noticed another flat patch of water. This one's smaller, maybe 20 feet across. It wasn't ahead of me. It was off to the left, closer to the shoreline. I slowed the boat and watched. Same thing. No ripples, no reflection distortion, just a perfect calm circle, like the lake had stopped breathing in that one spot. I drifted past it slowly. It didn't move this time, just stayed there, unmoving. Then, in the center, a single bubble rose and popped. Just one. I paddled harder after that. Didn't stop until I reached the northern edge where the trees start getting thicker. There's a little service dock used by maintenance crews. I pulled the boat up there and tied it off. When I stepped onto the dock, I realized the whole area smelled faintly like wet stone, like an old basement. No animals, no bugs, not even frogs. Just that smell and silence. I walked the rest of the way around the lake, maybe half a mile, to get back to my truck. The path was clear. Moonlight was enough to see by. When I got to the lot, my truck's dome light didn't come on when I opened the door. The battery wasn't dead. The engine turned over fine. But the dome light stayed dark, and my radio flickered before going silent. I drove home without turning it back on. The next morning, I went back to get the boat. The motor worked fine on the first try. The oar I'd used had 2 small dents on the side, near the end. I didn't remember hitting anything. The smooth patches in the water never came back. I still go out on the lake sometimes, but only during the day, and only near the edges. I was hiking alone that night, which I know isn't the smartest thing. I'd had a rough week, just one of those stretches where everything feels too loud and too close, and I needed to get out. I'd done that trail a dozen times. It wasn't far from town, and I figured if I stuck to the loop and kept a decent pace, I'd be back at my car before midnight. It was around 9:30 when I parked. No other cars in the lot. I brought a headlamp and a handheld flashlight, just in case. No real gear, just a water bottle, my phone, a hoodie tied around my waist. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, which I regretted later. The first hour was uneventful. Cool air, crickets, the usual underbrush noises. I always liked how the trail climbed for a bit, curved around the ridge, then dropped into this wide clearing with a bench someone built out of old logs. That clearing was maybe the halfway point. You could see the town lights through the trees on a clear night. It was quiet when I reached it. No wind, no animal sounds. I remember stopping at the edge, turning off my headlamp, and just standing there in the dark for a minute. Sometimes it feels good to be in a space like that where you can't see everything. I turned the flashlight back on and scanned the clearing before stepping out. That's when I saw the reflection. At first, I thought it was something on the trail ahead. Maybe a dropped bottle or an animal's eyes catching the beam, but it was too high. Not in the trees, above them. It looked like a small white circle floating up in the sky, maybe 30 or 40 feet above the tree line. Same shape and size as my flashlight beam, just hovering there, no flicker, no movement, like the light was bouncing off a mirror hanging in the air. I turned the flashlight off. The circle disappeared. Turned it back on, pointed a little to the left. The circle reappeared, but in a different spot, like it was matching the angle. Still high up, still dead still. I moved the flashlight around slowly. Each time I aimed slightly off-center, the circle followed at the same distance and size. But when I pointed the flashlight directly at where it was, nothing. Just black sky, like the reflection could only exist in the periphery. It didn't make sense. There was no glass up there, no drone, no fog. The air was dry. I walked slowly across the clearing, aiming my beam up at different angles. The reflection stayed with me. Always a few degrees off center, always the same distance above. I tried using my headlamp instead. No reflection with that. Only the handheld one did it. I stood there for a while, testing it. Sweeping the beam, turning it off and on. Each time, that white circle appeared, just hovering. Then it moved. Not much, just a small shift to the right, like someone nudging a mirror on a hinge. But it was smooth. And then it shifted again, the same way. A pause between each movement. Not like it was drifting, like it was adjusting. That's when I started feeling nervous. I backed up to the edge of the clearing and turned the flashlight off. No reflection, no sound. I stood there, not moving, waiting to see if it would reappear. After a minute or so, I turned around and started walking back. Slow at first, trying not to spook myself. I didn't run, I didn't want to trip or make noise, but I didn't stop again either. Maybe 10 minutes later, I stopped to catch my breath and looked up. I didn't use the flashlight this time, just looked. There wasn't much visible through the trees, but I thought I saw a faint white spot above me. Not moving, not blinking, just faint and round. I waited, keeping my eyes on it. It didn't move, but it felt like it was watching. I kept walking. After another 10 minutes, I was maybe a mile from the trailhead. I relaxed a little, figured I was overreacting. I turned the flashlight back on and aimed it ahead. The reflection popped up again. Same size, same angle. This time I didn't test it. I turned it off and kept walking in the dark. I started hearing a soft mechanical sound behind me. Barely there, like a quiet hum or the spin of an electric motor. Not steady. It pulsed. I didn't turn around. I just walked faster. After a few minutes, it stopped. I didn't hear it again. I made it to the trailhead around 11:30, maybe later. My car was the only one in the lot. I unlocked the door, got in, and sat there with the engine running. I didn't look up until I was a few miles down the road. When I did, I didn't see anything. No lights, no reflection. But the flashlight hasn't worked since. I replaced the batteries, checked the bulb, nothing. It's dead. The headlamp still works fine. I went back to that trail a week later during the day. Everything looked normal, no burn marks, no broken branches, nothing unusual in the clearing. I walked out to the middle and looked up. Just blue sky. I was flying from Denver to Portland, middle seat, somewhere over Idaho, I think. It was an afternoon flight, early spring, most clear skies with a few thick layers of clouds below us. Not the fluffy ones either. Flat, solid-looking cloud deck that stretched out like an endless white floor. The guy by the window was asleep, headphones in, mouth slightly open. Woman on my left was reading a book and hadn't looked up since we took off. I was bored out of my mind, just flipping through old videos on my phone, then decided to film out the window. I do that sometimes. I like watching the plane cut through clouds. It feels surreal, like you're not supposed to see the world from that high up. So I leaned a little toward the window, trying not to wake the guy, and held my phone up to record the clouds. It was calm. Sunlight was coming in at an angle, real soft, and the clouds below looked like you could walk across them. Then, maybe 20 seconds into filming, I saw something move. At first, I thought it was the shadow of our own plane, but it didn't line up. It was moving way too fast and from the wrong direction. It zipped across the top of the clouds, this dark, narrow shape, like a stretched-out oval, and it moved in this smooth, unnatural line. No wobble, no wings, just this silent, fast blur. Gone in maybe 2 seconds. I stopped recording right away and looked up, trying to see where it went. Nothing. The clouds were unbroken, just white as far as I could see. I kept scanning, squinting, waiting for it to come back, but there was nothing else. I thought maybe I imagined it, but when I replayed the video, the shadow was there. Faint, but definitely there. It crossed from right to left, way faster than any plane I've ever seen, and it didn't look like it was flying in the clouds. It was above them, skimming just over the top. I watched it 3 times, then tried to nudge the guy next to me awake. He stirred, but didn't really respond. I wanted someone else to look at the video, just to confirm I wasn't seeing things, but I felt weird saying anything. I didn't want to sound paranoid. After that, I kept my eyes glued out the window. I didn't take another video. I didn't even blink for a while, just kept watching the clouds. About 10 minutes passed with nothing. Then I started noticing something strange. The clouds below had shifted. They weren't flat anymore. They had this spiral pattern forming, subtle but definitely there, like someone had dragged a finger in slow circles across the surface. It wasn't wind. I've flown enough to know what turbulence or natural breaks in cloud cover look like. This was organized, like a shape was moving underneath, but I couldn't see it, only the way the clouds reacted. No one else around me seemed to notice. The plane was quiet, just the low hum of the engines and the occasional cough or page flip. Then the plane started to slow down. Not drastically, not like a sudden stop or anything, just this odd sensation, like we were dragging through thicker air. My stomach did that slight shift like when you descend, but we hadn't changed altitude. I checked the flight info on the screen in front of me. Same altitude, same speed, but something felt off. The clouds started breaking below us. Not clearing, breaking. Thin strips started appearing between the layers, revealing these dark shapes underneath. I leaned closer, trying to focus, but it was like looking down through fog into deeper water. I couldn't tell how far down they were. Some were long and narrow. Some just sat there, not moving. One of them rotated slowly, and that's when I realized it wasn't cloud at all. It was solid and massive, way bigger than our plane. The guy next to me shifted in his sleep, and I jerked back like I was doing something wrong. I looked around. No one else had noticed anything. People were just reading, watching movies, sleeping. The attendants hadn't said anything. The lights hadn't changed. I looked back out. Most of the shapes were gone or hidden again. Only one remained, way off to the left, and it was barely visible through the mist. I pulled out my phone again, hit record. I tried to zoom in, but it was just a blur. Then something moved in the opposite direction, fast and low, like that same shadow from before. And the clouds closed up again like nothing had been there. I stopped recording and sat back, heart pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been under us the entire time. Not one object, but maybe multiple. Watching, tracking, I don't know. About 20 minutes before we started our descent, everything just went back to normal. The clouds flattened. The air felt smoother. The flight attendants came around with trash bags making small talk. People started stretching, checking their phones. I was the only one still staring out the window. When we landed, I waited until we were at the gate before I looked at the video again. It was there. The spiral patterns, the faint shadows, the blur passing beneath. But it didn't look nearly as strange on the screen as it had in person. Almost like it lost something in translation. Just looked like weird cloud behavior. I showed it to my brother later that night. He squinted and said, "That's just another plane. You probably caught the shadow of a plane above you." But that didn't make sense. We were cruising altitude, and I've never seen a plane move like that, and it was below us, not above. I've looked at that footage 100 times since. I even slowed it down frame by frame. There's one moment right before the shadow crosses where the clouds kind of dip inward like they're being pressed from above, just for a second. Then they snap back. I didn't share the video anywhere. I didn't want people picking it apart or calling it fake. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. It's just a few seconds of something I can't explain, something that shouldn't have been there. I still fly sometimes, but I never sit by the window anymore. I went camping alone last fall. It wasn't anything new. I do solo trips pretty often, usually late in the season when the parks are empty. I like the quiet, and I know how to take care of myself. I had the gear, the maps, the food, the emergency beacon. It wasn't reckless. This was in northern Arizona near the Mogollon Rim. There's a spot I go to that's off one of those rough forest roads, unpaved, lots of washboarding, not well traveled. You wouldn't stumble on it by accident. I picked it because it's remote, but not inaccessible. No cell service, but that's normal out there. I got in around 4 in the afternoon. It was a little cloudy, but dry. I set up camp maybe 50 yards off the road, near a line of trees, but with a good view of the sky. There was a fire ring someone had built already, and I gathered a decent stack of wood. The usual stuff: pitch some logs, cook dinner, make some tea, watch the stars come out. I remember hearing a few animals early on, small things moving in the brush, but nothing that made me uneasy. Around 10, I doused the fire, brushed my teeth, and got in the tent. It was a still night, no wind, just that constant hush of the trees and the occasional owl. I read for a while on my Kindle, then went to sleep. I woke up around 2:30. No noise woke me. I just opened my eyes. My mouth was dry, and I had that weird feeling you get sometimes where you don't know what time it is, but something feels off. The tent was cold, colder than it had been when I went to bed. I listened for a while. It was dead silent. I sat up and unzipped the tent flap halfway. I could see my firewood pile in the glow of the moonlight, maybe 10 feet from the tent. But something was wrong with it. At first I thought an animal had messed with it, scattered it maybe. But when my eyes adjusted, I saw it wasn't scattered. The wood was arranged into a shape. It was a spiral. Not just a messy swirl. This was clean, careful. Every log and stick laid down flat in a clockwise spiral, tight and symmetrical, starting from the center and curving outward like a snail shell. The logs I'd stacked against the tree earlier were gone. Everything I'd gathered was in the spiral. It wasn't possible. I would have heard something. I'm a light sleeper out there. Plus, the dirt around the fire ring was soft and dry. If someone had walked up to my tent, I would have seen footprints. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out barefoot, just in my base layers. The air was freezing. I circled the spiral, shining the light low. The ground around it was smooth. No tracks, not from boots, not from paws, not even mine. Just undisturbed dirt and that perfect shape in the middle of it. I checked the tree line. Nothing. Just black trees and silence. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't panicking exactly, but something about it felt wrong. It was like seeing something where it shouldn't be. Like walking into your kitchen and finding every cabinet open and all the silverware arranged by size on the floor. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, scanning the woods, trying to convince myself it was some weird prank or animal behavior I hadn't heard of. But no animal makes shapes like that. And no person would go through the trouble of arranging firewood into a spiral in total silence without leaving prints and not take anything or damage anything else. Eventually, I broke the spiral apart. I don't know why. It just felt like it shouldn't stay that way. I didn't restack it the way I had before. I just kicked it apart and dragged the bigger logs back into a pile near the fire ring. Then I got back in the tent and zipped it up tight. I stayed awake until dawn, just lying there listening. Still no sounds, not even wind. At some point I realized I hadn't heard a single insect or night bird since I woke up. When the sun came up, I packed everything. I wasn't supposed to leave until the next day, but I didn't care. I didn't eat. Just broke camp, checked the site to make sure I wasn't leaving anything, and got in the car. Right before I pulled onto the road, I walked back over to where the spiral had been. The dirt was still smooth. No prints, like nothing had happened, like I'd imagined it, but I hadn't. The logs were still in a loose pile where I'd kicked them, not stacked like they were the night before. Something had moved them, and it hadn't made a sound. My son, Ben, was 9 when this happened. It was mid-August, and we'd driven out to the hills past town to watch the Perseids. He was getting really into space stuff that summer. Telescopes, planets, memorizing the names of stars. I used to be into that as a kid too, so it was something we could do together. I figured it'd be a cool memory for him. We left around 9 p.m. and drove about 40 minutes out, way past the last neighborhoods and up into this spot near an old fire road where the trees thin out and there's a good patch of sky. Not official camping land or anything, just dirt pull-offs and open fields. I'd been out there before for meteor showers. You get the occasional car passing through, but it's usually dead quiet. We brought the telescope, some folding chairs, snacks, a couple blankets. It was one of those dry, still nights where the air feels heavier than it should, but the sky was clear. No wind at all. You could hear the insects way off in the brush. We set up near a little rise and just watched for a while. Saw a bunch of shooting stars. He was freaking out every time one went by. He pointed out constellations. I helped him get the telescope aligned. We spotted Saturn around 10, and the rings looked great, really crisp. He was bouncing between that and scanning around randomly. I remember around 10:30, he pointed to a light moving across the sky and said, "Satellite." He'd gotten decent at recognizing them. Steady motion, no blinking, soft white glow. I looked where he was pointing. Sure enough, it was going northwest to southeast, just above the tree line. We watched it for maybe 20 seconds. It moved like every other satellite I'd seen, straight line, constant speed. But then it slowed down. Not gradually, it just kind of stopped, mid-orbit. No wobble, no curve. It didn't dim or blink or fade, it just locked in place like it hit a wall. I remember we both kind of went, huh, at the same time. It didn't make sense. I thought maybe it was a plane turning or a drone or something, but it wasn't looking, and it was too high. No sound either. We kept watching. It just hovered there, not moving, not changing brightness, just sitting exactly where it had stopped. I looked at Ben. He looked confused, not scared, just trying to make sense of it. I got behind the telescope and tried to find it again. Took me a bit, but I locked onto it. It looked exactly the same, just a small bright dot. Not pulsing, not changing shape. I tried adjusting focus, thinking maybe I'd see some detail, but it didn't help. It just stayed a dot. Then it moved again. Not forward. Not sideways. Up. It went straight up, faster than I could track it with the scope. I tried to keep it in view, but it shot up like someone yanked it with a string. No curve, no arc, just vertical motion. It got smaller and dimmer fast. Within maybe 4 or 5 seconds, it was just gone. I pulled away from the scope and looked at Ben. He was staring straight up, his mouth open. I asked, "Did you see that?" And he just nodded. We didn't say much for a while. We just sat there in the dark, looking at the empty spot in the sky where it had been. I remember thinking about weather balloons or high-altitude aircraft, but I couldn't come up with anything that made sense. Satellites don't stop. They definitely don't go straight up. We stayed another hour or so, half watching the sky, but it kind of killed the mood. He kept checking the same area like it might come back. Every time a plane passed overhead, he'd ask, "Do you think that's it?" And I'd have to say no. On the drive back, he was quiet. About halfway home, he said, "I don't think that was a satellite." And I said, "Yeah, I don't think so either." The next day, he asked if we should report it, but I didn't know who we'd even tell. I just said maybe other people saw it too. He didn't bring it up much after that, but a few months later, I found a drawing in his room. Just a dot in the sky with arrows pointing up and some question marks around it. We still go stargazing sometimes, but he's not as into it as he used to be. I never saw anything like that again. The power went out around 9:15. I remember the time because I had just paused a movie and stood up to get a drink when everything clicked off. TV, kitchen lights, even the fridge hum stopped. It wasn't just my place. I looked out the window and the whole block was dark. Porch lights, street lamps, houses across the road, nothing. It wasn't storming. No wind, no rain, just a normal September night. Warm, kind of still. I figured it was a transformer issue or a scheduled outage nobody warned us about. I stepped outside to see if anyone else was out, maybe checking breakers or calling the utility company. My neighbor, Steve, was already standing in his driveway in pajama pants, smoking. He saw me and gave a little shrug, like, "What now?" A couple other people came out onto their porches too. You could hear confused voices up and down the street, but it wasn't loud. More like everyone was half waiting for the power to flicker back on so we could just go back inside and forget it. I stood on the sidewalk, sipping my beer, kind of zoning out. The stars were actually visible for once with all the lights off. It was almost nice, weirdly quiet. Then everything got quieter. It's hard to explain, but the background sounds, the bugs, the distant highway hum, whatever slight breeze there'd been, all just seemed to stop at once. Not like something loud drowned them out, more like they left, like the whole area hit mute. Steve noticed it too. He lowered his cigarette and turned toward me, brows raised. "You hear that?" he asked, but there was nothing to hear. I looked up, kind of instinctively, and saw it. There was this shape hanging in the sky, maybe 200 feet up, maybe more. It wasn't a drone, too big, way too still. And it wasn't a plane, no sound, no blinking lights, no movement, just this glow. It wasn't bright like a spotlight, more like the way a screen lights up a dark room. Soft but obvious. Oval-shaped, yellowish white. Not quite a disc, not a perfect circle either, hard to pin down. Like the edges didn't stay still, almost like heat waves around it, but not quite. You could look at it, but it didn't feel right to. No one said anything for a few seconds. I think we were all processing it separately. Then a voice, someone farther down the block, goes, "What the hell is that?" And the quiet kind of cracked. A few more people started coming outside, pointing. Phones were out, no signal, no power. Some were trying to take photos, but I don't think any of them turned out. I tried too, but my screen just showed black. Like it wasn't picking up the light at all. It didn't move. Not an inch. It just hovered, completely silent, directly over the middle of town. Not over our street specifically, more like the center, probably a couple blocks south of us, judging by the angle. I stepped into the road for a better view. Steve joined me. We just stood there, staring up. 3 minutes. That's how long it lasted, give or take. I didn't count, but someone said later they'd timed it. At one point, a dog barked. just once, sharp and loud, like it had been holding its breath too. Then quiet again. The object didn't rotate or flash or do anything dramatic. It just was there, glowing steadily. No sound, no wind, no hum. Even the air felt too still. The temperature didn't change, but I remember feeling my arms get cold anyway. And then it blinked out, not like it flew away, not like it sped up and vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone, like turning off a light. No fade, no trail, just gone. About 5 seconds later, the power came back on. The streetlights clicked, porch bulbs lit up, the fridge in my house made that weird startup rattle. Everyone just kind of looked at each other. Nobody said much. A few people started laughing, but it wasn't funny. It was that awkward, nervous kind of laugh, like you're trying to shake something off. I went inside. Steve stood out there a little longer, but we didn't talk again that night. The next day, I thought maybe I'd see something online, other people reporting it, maybe a news article, maybe some official explanation, but there was barely anything. Just a couple local posts saying there was a brief outage, likely due to a grid fault. Nobody mentioned the light. I called my cousin, who lives on the east end of town, to see if she'd seen it too. She said her power had gone out, but she hadn't gone outside. She didn't notice anything weird. I walked down to the hardware store that afternoon, and the guy at the register, Nick, I think, asked if my place had lost power too. I said yeah, and asked if he'd seen anything strange. He looked at me kind of funny and asked what I meant. When I said, "The thing in the sky," he just frowned and said, "What thing?" I dropped it. Later that week, I brought it up with Steve. He didn't want to talk about it at first, just shook his head and said, "Don't think about it too much." I still don't really know what I saw. I know it was there, and I know it wasn't just me. There were a dozen people on that street who saw it too, but nobody talks about it now. Like it didn't happen, or like they don't want to admit it did. The night shift was supposed to be routine, just me and the train cutting through the country on the 11:45 freight run. I'd done the route dozens of times, maybe more. The tracks run parallel to a thick stretch of woods for miles, nothing much except the trees and the occasional road crossing. The kind of place where you expect the usual sounds, crickets, distant coyotes, the hum of the engine. I remember that night because something was off almost from the start. The weather was clear but cool. I'd just settled into the cab, flipping switches and checking gauges, when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was a shadow playing tricks on me. On the left side, just beyond the tree line, there was something moving alongside the train. Not on the tracks, not in the trees, but close, like it was pacing us. It wasn't easy to make out in the dark. No lights, no shape at first. Just a black patch against the darker forest. But it was moving exactly with us. Same speed, same direction. I glanced down at the speedometer, about 45 miles per hour, and sure enough, the shadow stayed level. I slowed the train a bit, just to see if it would change its pace. It matched the slower speed immediately, no hesitation. I thought maybe it was another vehicle on some service road, but there wasn't any road near enough, and there wasn't a sound. No engine, no wheels on gravel, no rustling in the trees. Nothing. I tapped the mic and called the dispatcher to ask if there was anything on the side of the tracks, some maintenance vehicle maybe, but they said no. Nothing scheduled, no reports. The voice on the other end sounded normal, but I swear my own voice sounded weird over the radio, quieter, like it didn't belong to me. I kept looking out the window. The shape didn't have any lights, but it was big, bigger than a car. It was hard to tell exactly what it was, but it wasn't moving like an animal either. No bouncing or shifting. It moved smoothly, keeping perfect pace alongside the train. I kept watching it as the train rolled on, the miles ticking by. The shadow stayed right there, just beyond the tree line, dark and silent. At one point I blinked and it seemed closer, but when I looked again, it was the same distance. It didn't matter if I looked away for a second. When I looked back, it was there, like it was following me, or maybe watching. I felt this strange pressure in my chest, like my heart was trying to catch up with my throat. I tried to tell myself it was just some trick of the light, or my mind playing games with the shadows, but it didn't go away. About 15 miles in, just after the second crossing, the shadow stopped matching the speed. The train was hitting a slight downhill, picking up pace, and this thing stayed steady, not accelerating. For a moment, it looked like it was falling behind. Then, without any warning, it shot straight up. I mean, straight up. Not in a curve or arc, like a spear going into the sky at an angle that made no sense. I was watching it the whole time, and in less than 2 seconds, it disappeared above the tree line and out of sight. No noise, no flash, no trail. I sat frozen, hands on the throttle, staring at where it had been. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then the usual night sounds started up again. The wind in the trees, some distant owl hoots, the steady chug of the engine. I called the dispatcher again, but the line was static. No response. The rest of the run felt strange, like the air around me was heavier. I kept glancing outside, but there was nothing, just the trees sliding past under the moonlight. When I pulled into the yard, I asked a couple of other conductors if they'd seen anything weird on their runs, but everyone said no, just normal nights. The next morning, I checked my shift report. The train's speed and timing were all normal. No sudden stops, no signals picked up, but I had this odd sense that something wasn't right. I thought about telling the company, but what would I say? That some silent, dark object paced me for miles and then shot into the sky? They'd laugh it off, so I kept quiet. It's been weeks now. I keep replaying that night in my head, the way it moved with me, the way it vanished so suddenly. Nothing about it made sense, and I don't think it ever will. It happened last fall, around mid-October. I'd started jogging at night after work to clear my head. I live in a small town just outside of Asheville, and there's this paved trail that runs along the edge of a wooded park. It's not isolated exactly, but it gets real quiet after 9 p.m., especially on weekdays. That night, I didn't start my run until a little after 10. I remember because I checked my watch at the trailhead, 10:12. It was cold enough that I wore gloves and a hoodie, but not freezing yet. The kind of cold where your breath hangs in the air and the tips of your ears sting after 20 minutes. The path is about 3 miles, with a loop at the end, so I usually run out and back. There are lampposts for the first half mile, and then it's just moonlight and the occasional security light from a house in the distance. No one else was out that night. No cars on the nearby road, no bikes, no other joggers. The first part of the run felt normal. I had my earbuds in, music low enough to still hear my footsteps. About 15 minutes in, I reached the far end of the loop and slowed down to catch my breath. There's a bench there, and I usually pause for a minute before heading back. I stood there breathing, staring off at the tree line. That's when I noticed something. Red light. Not bright. Dim, like taillights through fog, but steady. I thought it was a cell tower at first. There's one a couple miles north, but it's never looked that close, and it didn't blink, just hung there. I pulled out my earbuds and stepped off the trail a bit to get a better view. That's when I saw there were 3 lights, not one. They formed a perfect triangle, wide, maybe the length of a football field across, though it was hard to judge with nothing else lit up around it. They weren't on the tower. They were floating above the trees. The lights didn't move. They just hovered. The triangle wasn't tilted or spinning, just there. Solid. Dead silent. I looked around to see if maybe someone else was nearby, but the woods were dark and still. No wind, no crickets, no branches moving. It was the kind of quiet where your ears start ringing a little. I watched the lights for maybe 30 seconds before one of them slowly rotated around the others. Not fast, just a smooth motion like a second hand ticking on a big clock. Then it stopped, and another light took its place, rotating the same way. It was like they were taking turns moving. That's when I felt it. This weird pressure in my chest, like standing too close to a speaker, but there was no sound. I don't know how else to explain it. Just a heavy, low thump I couldn't hear but could feel. It came in pulses. I counted 5 of them, spaced about 10 seconds apart. The clouds were rolling in from the west. Thin at first, just wispy streaks, but thickening fast. The moon dimmed behind them, and one by one, the red lights started fading. Not blinking out, fading. Like someone slowly turned down a dimmer switch. First, the top one disappeared into the haze. Then the second, lower right. The last one, lower left, held for a moment longer and then vanished, just as a thicker cloud passed through. I stood there for a minute, trying to see if they'd come back, but the sky was fully covered by then. Nothing above but dark gray. Still no sound, not even leaves rustling. Just that pressure feeling, lingering, like it didn't want to leave yet. I finally turned back toward the trail. My legs were cold. I felt stupid standing there, like I was waiting for something that wasn't coming back. I put my earbuds in again, but didn't press play. Just started jogging, fast. I didn't look back. About halfway down the trail, I passed under the first lamppost again. That's when I noticed something else. There was a shape on the path ahead, dark, low to the ground. I slowed, thinking maybe it was a dog or someone sitting. But as I got closer, I saw it wasn't either. It was a pile of leaves, but in a weird spot, right in the middle of the trail, too even, like it had been swept there. There were no other piles like it anywhere nearby. I ran past it, didn't stop. I don't know why, but it bothered me more than it should have. It looked arranged, like someone had meant for it to be there. Back at the parking lot, my car was the only one left. The lot's next to a field, and across that is a small playground with a chain link fence around it. As I was unlocking my door, I caught something in the corner of my eye. Movement near the swings. I turned. Nothing was moving. But one of the swings, the one closest to the fence, was slightly tilted. Not swinging, just tilted like someone had pulled it back and let go, but with no momentum. It just hung there, slightly off-center. I got in the car and locked the doors. On the drive home, my radio wouldn't pick up anything, not even static. I tried scanning through the FM range, then AM. Just silence. The screen lit up like it was working, but no stations. I turned it off after a while. When I got home, Melissa was already asleep. I showered, then checked the weather on my phone, said cloud cover moved in just after 10:40. That lined up, but no reports of anything unusual, no power outages, no aircraft alerts, nothing. I went out the next day and ran the same trail, mid-morning. It all looked normal. No red lights. The pile of leaves was gone. Probably just wind, I told myself. Probably someone else ran through and scattered it. I didn't run at night for a while after that. Not because I was scared exactly. I just couldn't stop thinking about how quiet it got. How something could be right there above the trees, completely still, with no noise. Nothing natural stays that still. Nothing natural rotates like that. I tried looking it up a few times. Drone formations, military tests, stuff like that, but nothing matched. Everything I found either had blinking lights or made noise or wasn't capable of hovering that smoothly for that long. And those lights were too far apart for it to be one drone, unless it wasn't one thing at all. Anyway, I'm back to running during the day now. Still take that trail sometimes, still glance up at the trees when I hit the far loop. Just to check. I was out in the backyard, just messing around with my camera, trying to get some footage of the stars. It was one of those clear nights where the sky is full of little pinpricks of light and the air was cold but still. I'd been interested in astrophotography for a while, so I set my camera on a tripod, aimed it straight up, and started recording. The plan was to catch some long exposure shots of constellations, or maybe a shooting star if I got lucky. I wasn't expecting much, just a quiet night with some nice visuals. I remember glancing up every so often, just soaking it in. The stars seemed steady, the usual slow drift across the sky. About 20 minutes in, I noticed something odd on the screen of my camera. There was a quick flash, a brief streak of light, way up high, near the edge of the frame. At first I thought it might be a plane or a satellite passing by, but when I zoomed in, the movement didn't match anything I'd seen before. It moved in a sharp Z pattern, like it would dart in one direction, then suddenly zigzag the other way, then back again, all in quick, jerky motions. The speed was what really got me. It was way too fast for any plane or satellite. Those usually move in smooth lines or arcs, but this thing was changing direction faster than anything I knew. I rewound the footage a couple of times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The flash happened again, and I caught a better look this time. No blinking lights, no steady glow, just a sharp flash, then a quick move sideways, then another flash. It felt unnatural, like it was watching or scanning or something. I stepped back from the camera and looked up at the sky, trying to find whatever it was with my own eyes, but there was nothing. just stars, still and silent. That's when the weirdness started. I put the camera down and sat on the porch steps. The air felt heavier, like the night had suddenly gotten quieter. Usually you'd hear crickets or wind through the trees, but it was dead silent, not just quiet, like someone hit pause on everything. I kept glancing up, hoping to see that flash again, but the sky was empty. I didn't feel right, though. Like something was watching me from way up there, just beyond what I could see. Then I noticed my phone was dead. I hadn't checked it in a while, but I swear it had battery before I went outside. Now it was completely off. No lights, no vibrations. I tried charging it, but nothing. That struck me as odd because I'd plugged it in earlier that evening. I brushed it off and went back to the camera, hoping maybe the battery was dead. But the camera had plenty of power. I checked the settings and the files. The recording was intact, but every time I looked at the footage, the flashes seemed to jump in different places on the screen. Like the thing was moving, but also changing where it showed up. That made me feel uneasy. Not scared, exactly, but like I'd stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. I stayed outside for a little longer, just staring at the sky. The usual calm I got from stargazing was missing. I kept feeling like something was off, like the night was holding its breath. After maybe half an hour, I heard a faint tapping sound behind me. It was slow, irregular, like someone tapping their fingernails on wood. I turned around, but no one was there. The backyard was empty, just shadows and the soft glow of my porch light. The tapping stopped as suddenly as it started. I stood up and checked the yard carefully. No movement, no footprints, nothing out of place. But that silence felt heavy, like the night itself was waiting for me to leave. I packed up my stuff and went inside. As I closed the door, I glanced back out the window. There was a light hovering just above the treetops, small and faint, not blinking or moving like a plane. It stayed there for a minute, then disappeared. Inside, I tried turning on my phone again. Nothing. I checked the clock. It said 12 a.m., but I was sure it had been closer to 11:15 when I first went out. I started to feel kind of off, like I'd lost some time. I didn't want to believe it, but I had that sinking feeling that whatever was out there had been messing with me somehow. The flashes, the silence, the dead phone, the tapping, all those little things piling up. I fell asleep with the camera on my desk, hoping the next day I'd find some explanation. In the morning, my phone worked fine. The clock was back to normal. The footage showed the flashes, the weird Z-pattern moves, but nothing else. I keep watching it, trying to figure out what I caught. Sometimes I think I see a shape in the flashes, something that isn't a plane or satellite or shooting star, but the more I watch, the less I understand. It's like the thing was there, but also not really there, and I keep wondering what it was doing there in the night sky, moving like that, watching, just out of reach. I woke up because it felt like someone was shining a flashlight in my eyes. At first I thought it was the moon, but then I realized it wasn't moving at all. It was this sharp, narrow beam of white light cutting straight down through the tree branches right above my tent. The forest around me was dark except for that beam, and it didn't flicker or change, just steady, like a spotlight locked in place. I lay there for a minute, frozen, trying to figure out what the hell I was seeing. I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest road, no towns or cars or anything that could explain it. I didn't hear any noise either. No hum, no buzzing, no helicopter or plane engines, nothing. Just this perfect beam of light, bright enough to shine through the leaves and cast weird, long shadows on the ground. I grabbed my phone, but it was dead. No signal, no battery left. Forgot to charge it before I left town. So I couldn't even call anyone or take a picture. I debated waking my friend, who was camping a little ways off, but I didn't want to freak him out over what might be just a weird flashlight or someone messing around. I slowly unzipped my tent, poked my head out, and the beam was still there, no change. It was like it was focused on a single spot, right in the middle of a clearing, maybe 50 feet away. I stood up carefully, trying not to make noise, and took a step toward the light. As soon as I moved, the beam vanished, just cut out like someone flipped a switch. No fading, no dimming, gone completely. I blinked, confused, and looked around. Nothing, just the dark forest again, silent and still. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, or it was some kind of weird trick of the light, but my heart was pounding. I tried moving toward where it had been a couple more times, but every time I stepped closer, the light snapped off. It was like it was watching me, or maybe waiting for me to stop moving. I stayed still for a while, just staring into the spot where the light had been. Then I noticed something else. The air felt off, like it was heavier or thicker somehow. It wasn't cold or hot, just weird, like the forest had been holding its breath. The next thing I noticed was the silence, not just the usual quiet of the woods at night, but a different kind of silence. No crickets, no wind rustling through the leaves, no distant owl or anything. It was like all the usual sounds had been sucked out. That alone felt wrong. I could hear my own breathing loud in my ears. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and started walking back toward my tent, but I kept glancing over my shoulder. The darkness felt too complete, like it wasn't just night, but like the forest was blank and watching me. Back at my tent, I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on. The beam was narrow and sharp, cutting through the black, but nothing was there. No light anywhere else. I swept the beam around the clearing and the trees, but everything was normal. The forest looked the same as always. No signs of anything strange or out of place. No footprints, no broken branches, no weird glows or shapes. I went back inside the tent and zipped it up. Tried to calm down, but my mind kept going back to that light. I felt like I wasn't alone out there, even though I didn't hear or see anything. I lay back down and eventually fell asleep. But when I woke up a few hours later, the sky was starting to lighten, and everything looked normal again. No trace of the beam, no feeling of that heavy air, no silence. Just regular forest sounds, birds waking up, wind in the leaves. I packed up and left right after sunrise, not waiting for my friend to wake up. I didn't say anything about it at the time, mostly because I wasn't sure what I'd even say. It was just too strange. I've told a couple of close friends since, but it always sounds crazy when I say it out loud. There's this spot in the woods where the light had been, though, and sometimes when I think about it, I wonder if it's still there, watching, waiting. But every time I try to imagine going back, I find a reason not to. That's it. Just me, the light, and a silence that didn't belong. I noticed it the morning after that weird lightning storm we had. It wasn't even a real storm, just a few sharp flashes around 2 or 3 in the morning. No thunder, no rain. Just light. Enough to wake me up and make the dogs bark, but nothing came of it. I figured it was heat lightning or maybe transformers blowing somewhere, though I didn't hear any pops. Didn't think much of it until the next morning. I was walking the north pasture around 7, checking the fence line like I do every day. That part of the property's flat and mostly open, about 4 acres of grazing field, nothing fancy. We've had a dry summer, so the grass had been yellowing, but still thick and tall in most spots. As I came over the little rise near the southeast corner, I saw something off about 50 yards out. The color looked wrong. It was a square, dead center in the pasture, about 20 feet by 20, just sitting there like someone had laid carpet down. The grass in that square wasn't just dry or scorched, it was gray, a flat, dull gray, like someone had drained all the color out of it. Not patchy, completely uniform. The edges were sharp as a knife, perfect right angles, no feathering or fade. I walked up to it real slow. Not because I was scared, but because it looked fake, like some kind of prank or trick on the eyes. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The grass was standing straight up, same height as the rest of the field, but the blades were stiff and dry, almost like wire. I touched one and it snapped off between my fingers. Not crunchy like dead grass usually is, brittle like plastic, and cold. It was already pushing 80 degrees out and the sun had been up for an hour, but that square was noticeably cooler. No dew either, even though the rest of the pasture had a light sheen on it. I tried pulling a handful up. The roots came clean, no resistance, and underneath it the dirt looked pale. Not white exactly, but washed out like the soil had been bleached. The weirdest part? No bugs, no ants, no beetles, no worms, just nothing. I dug down a couple inches with my pocket knife and didn't see a single living thing. The cows wouldn't go near it. They usually wander all over that pasture in the mornings, but that day they were clustered at the far end, just standing still, looking in that direction. Not grazing, not moving around, just watching. That afternoon, I tried bringing the dogs out. I had two at the time, both mutts, both curious as hell about everything. But as soon as we got within maybe 20 feet, they stopped. One of them started whining, tail between her legs, and the other growled low and steady, like he saw something I didn't. They both backed away, pulling at their leashes. Wouldn't go any closer. The next day the wind picked up, gusty and dry, the kind of wind that usually lays the tall grass flat in waves. But that gray square didn't move. Not a single blade shifted. I stood out there for 10 minutes watching it, and the grass all around it bent and swayed, but the square stayed perfectly still, like it was sealed off from everything around it. I didn't tell anyone right away, partly because I figured it might go away on its own, and partly because I didn't want to sound like I was losing it. I took a photo with my phone, but it didn't come out right. It looked like a shadow in the picture, nothing like what I saw with my own eyes. The gray didn't show up. It just looked darker, like the grass had been matted down. A few nights later, I woke up to this buzzing sound. Not loud, but constant, like static or distant power lines. I figured maybe something was wrong with the barn's breaker panel, so I went out with a flashlight. The sound wasn't coming from the barn, it was coming from the pasture. I followed it all the way to the ridge. As soon as I crested the little hill, the sound stopped, just gone. Not faded, not distant, like someone flipped a switch. That square was glowing, not bright, just a faint pale shimmer like moonlight on frost. It wasn't casting light on anything around it, no shadows, no reflection, but the grass itself was giving off this weird soft glow, almost white blue. I stood there maybe 50 feet away, just staring at it. I didn't go closer. I don't know why exactly. It wasn't fear, not like being scared of a bear or something. More like pressure. Like I wasn't supposed to. After a few minutes, the glow faded and the buzzing came back for just a second, then cut out again. I walked back to the house without turning around once. The next morning, I found the fence near that side was down. 3 posts snapped clean near the base, like something had pushed straight through without slowing down. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. The cows were still at the far end, all bunched together and wide-eyed. One of them had cut its side open somehow, long, shallow scrape like it had tried to get away from something fast. I called the vet and she patched her up, said it didn't look like a fence injury. Too clean, too smooth. After that, I put up some temporary electric wire around the square, just a couple strands on stakes. Not to keep anything out really, but more to mark the boundary. I didn't want to forget where it started. About a week later, I noticed something new. In the center of the square, the grass had started to lay flat. Not crushed or trampled, just folded. In a spiral, clockwise, tight at the center and widening as it went out. Perfectly even. You'd think someone used a rake and a compass. It didn't happen gradually, it wasn't there in the morning, but by late afternoon it was fully formed. I didn't touch it. That night, I sat up late on the porch, keeping watch. Around 2:30, the buzzing started again. This time, it was louder. Still not painful, but steady and low, like it was vibrating under the ground. I stayed where I was, looking out over the field. No lights, no shapes, just that sound. Then the porch light flickered. Once, then again, then went out completely. Same with the floodlight over the barn. Everything went dead quiet, except the buzzing. I waited. 10, maybe 15 minutes. Then everything came back on at once. Lights, fridge hum, even the ceiling fan inside. I walked out to the edge of the field and looked toward the square. Couldn't see anything from there, but I felt it. Same pressure, like the air was heavier around it. The next day, the spiral was gone. Grass was still gray, still brittle, but the pattern had vanished, replaced by something else, a grid. Not drawn in the dirt. Laid into the grass itself, square sections, each maybe 2 feet wide, arranged perfectly across the entire area. Like a chessboard, only every square was the same gray color. The only difference was texture. Some were laid flat, others stood straight up, alternating. It made my head hurt to look at it. I gave up trying to make sense of it. I just kept walking the fence, keeping the animals away, watching. After about 3 weeks, it started to fade. The color came back first, slowly like water soaking through paper, then the texture softened. Grass stopped snapping under my boots. Bugs came back. I saw a bird land near the edge and not freak out. The dog stopped growling when we got close. One morning I walked right up to it and it was just grass again. Still a little paler than the rest of the field, but alive. No spiral, no grid, no glow. It never spread. Never came back. But every now and then, when I walk the fence early in the morning, I get this metallic taste in my mouth near that spot, like I bit a piece of tinfoil. It goes away after a few seconds. No sound, no lights, just that weird taste. I don't graze the animals there anymore. I let the grass grow tall, let the wind push it around like normal. Nothing strange has happened since, but I keep the temporary fence up, just in case. I was driving from Flagstaff to Bakersfield, taking the long way through the Mojave because I'd had enough of interstates and wanted a quieter route. It was just past 10 at night, maybe closer to 11. I remember because I was debating whether to stop somewhere or keep pushing through. I didn't have to be anywhere until the next afternoon, so I figured I'd drive until I got tired. I was somewhere past Ludlow, one of those stretches where you lose track of time because it's just flat road and empty desert, and your headlights picking out the same 50 feet over and over. No other cars, no signs, just a single-lane road and nothing else. The kind of silence that makes you lower the radio without even realizing it. The road had started to wind a bit, not sharp curves, but enough to keep me alert. I had the windows down to stay awake. Cool desert air coming in, dry and steady. I wasn't tired yet, but I was in that zone where your thoughts start to drift. I remember thinking about my old truck and whether I should replace the tires before winter. Dumb stuff. Then, somewhere past a big bend with no markers, I glanced in the rearview mirror. There were 3 lights behind me, faint, white-blue, all the same size and spaced evenly apart. Not headlights, too dim and too low, almost at the level of the road itself, but floating. Not high like a car's high beams and not spaced wide like a truck. They looked like orbs, not beams. No glow, just a soft presence. At first I thought it was a reflection, something bouncing off the glass. But when I tilted the mirror a little, they didn't move. They stayed locked in place, following. I stared at them for a few seconds, long enough to start drifting in my lane. When I corrected, I checked the side mirrors. Nothing. No lights behind me, but in the rear view, still there. Still floating low, still in perfect formation. I slowed down a little. Not much, just enough to see if they'd react. They didn't get closer or farther. They stayed exactly the same distance behind me, like they were matching speed. I pulled off the road a bit, just nudged onto the shoulder. No other cars had passed in over an hour, and there wasn't any real traffic to speak of. I figured I'd let them pass if it was someone screwing around with drones or something. I stopped and turned off my headlights. Engine still running. Then I looked in the mirror again. The lights were gone. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute, nothing came around the bend behind me. No sounds, no dust trail, just that low, constant wind moving over the sand. I got out of the car, left the engine running, walked to the back and looked up and down the road. Nothing. No signs of anything. No power lines, no fences. I even walked into the middle of the road and stood there, just listening. It was totally silent. Then I heard a crackle. Not loud, more like static coming from inside the car. I thought maybe the radio was acting up, so I leaned into the window and turned the volume knob, but it was already off. The noise was still there, soft and irregular, like something brushing against a microphone. Then it stopped. I turned off the engine, trying to listen better, and everything went dead. No more static, just the sound of wind again. I waited another minute, maybe more. Then I got back in and kept driving. For a while, everything felt normal again. I didn't see the lights. The road was just as empty as before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I kept checking the mirror every few seconds. I wasn't even thinking about it. It just became a reflex. About 10 minutes later, I started seeing movement on the side of the road. Not animals, not clear shapes, just shadows, like something ducking out of view when the headlights swept past. I told myself it was probably scrub or Joshua trees catching the wind. but a couple of times it looked like a figure crouching down, staying low. I didn't stop again. Then, without really noticing when it started, I realized I could see the three lights again. Not right behind me this time, off to the left. In the desert, maybe 50 yards out, gliding along at the same pace as my car. Still equidistant, still low to the ground. No beams, no visible source, just faint glowing points, moving over the terrain like it wasn't even there. I slowed down to about 40. They kept pace. I sped up to 60. Same thing. Always off to the side, just behind my peripheral vision. When I turned my head to look, they were gone. But when I looked forward again, they'd drift back into my edge of vision. It was like they didn't want to be looked at directly. Eventually, the road curved again and dipped into a small canyon. The terrain got tighter, rockier. I lost sight of the lights completely. They didn't come back. That should have been a relief, but it made me more anxious, like I'd lost track of something that had been watching me. I stopped again a little after midnight to get some water from the back seat. When I opened the door, the dome light flickered twice and didn't come on. Not burned out, just didn't activate. The dashboard lights were still on, but faint, like the battery was dying, even though the engine was fine. I closed the door, waited, tried the dome light switch manually, nothing. I got out the flashlight I keep in the glove box and aimed it around. The air felt heavier somehow, still dry, still cool, but like something was pressing down a little. Then I noticed this faint humming. Not loud, not even rhythmic, just a low vibration like a power line or an engine idling far away. But there were no power lines out there, nothing man-made at all. The sound faded when I stepped a few feet away from the car, then came back when I moved closer again. I crouched down and put my hand on the ground, couldn't feel anything. The sound was in the air, not the earth. I checked under the car, around the wheels, nothing. No leaks, no damage. But that hum kept going, just barely there, like it was circling me. I got back in and drove without stopping again until I hit Barstow. There were no more lights, no figures, no sound. But I couldn't stop glancing in the mirror the whole way. Even after I hit the city lights, I kept checking. Every few seconds, like part of me expected to see those three faint points, perfectly spaced, floating behind me again. It was around 10:30 at night, early March, clear sky with a full moon. I remember that part because it was one of the only reasons I even went out. I don't usually jog that late, especially not alone, but I'd had a long day, my head was racing, and the weather was weirdly nice for the time of year. Cold but calm, no wind, no snow, dry pavement. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood on the edge of a small town in northern Colorado. Lots of space between houses, not much light pollution. There's a stretch of road about a mile and a half long that loops through some open residential area, undeveloped lots, ranch-style homes, fields, that kind of thing. No sidewalks, just asphalt and a narrow shoulder. I started off, like I always do, headphones in, sleeves rolled up a bit, slow pace at first. There was nothing weird at the beginning. A couple porch lights were on, but no cars passed me and I didn't see anyone else out. Just my breathing and the occasional crunch of grit under my shoes. I think I made it about 3/4 of a mile before something felt off. I can't explain it exactly, but the air got heavy, almost. Like it had weight to it. Not hotter, not colder, just thicker. I took my earbuds out, thinking maybe it was some kind of pressure drop or something with the weather, but everything was still dead quiet. No dogs barking, no insects, no wind in the trees, just nothing. And then I got that feeling. The being watched one. Everyone's had it. But this was sharper, more specific, like I knew exactly where the gaze was coming from, directly above me. I stopped jogging and looked up, squinting because the moon was so bright. At first I didn't see anything, just the stars and that pale glow over everything. But then something moved. Not a light, not a streak, just the absence of stars, a triangle of black, low and slow. It wasn't completely invisible. You know how when a plane passes in front of stars, it sort of distorts the sky for a second? This was like that, but there was no engine sound, no blinking lights, and it was moving too smoothly. Not hovering, not wobbling, just coasting. Maybe 2 or 3 stories above the street, directly overhead. I stepped backward without meaning to, just instinct. I didn't hear anything. Not even a breeze. But I swear I felt something, like a static charge. My arms broke out in goosebumps even though I hadn't been cold before. The object was a perfect triangle. Not a V shape like some stealth planes, more like an equilateral triangle with faint lines on the underside. I could only see them when it passed under the moonlight, not glowing or illuminated, just barely catching the light. I watched it for maybe 10 seconds. It wasn't going fast, maybe 10 or 15 miles an hour, but it didn't wobble or tilt or make a sound. Just kept going, and it was big. I don't know how to estimate size from below, but it was bigger than any small aircraft I've seen, maybe the size of a house. When it passed over the next row of trees and out of sight, I just stood there. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't running or screaming or anything. It felt more like my body didn't know what to do, like it didn't fit the list of threats I'm wired to react to. I stood still for maybe a full minute before I realized how quiet it still was. That was the worst part, honestly. The silence felt wrong. It didn't lift once the thing moved on. It just stayed. I turned around and started walking back the way I came. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My legs felt heavy and twitchy, like after you've been startled real bad. I kept looking up, but the sky was empty again. Stars, moon, the usual. When I got close to my house, I saw that my porch light had turned off. It's one of those motion sensor ones, and it's never off when I come back, especially if I've left the timer on, which I always do. I walked up the steps, waved my arm at the sensor. Nothing. I flipped the switch inside. Still nothing. That light didn't come back on until the next day, and I didn't do anything to fix it. I checked the bulb, the wiring, everything looked normal. It just started working again later like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept listening for weird sounds outside, humming, static, anything. But there was nothing, just my own house creaking and settling like usual. A couple days later, I tried jogging that same loop again. It was during the day this time. Everything looked normal. Same trees, same open fields, same houses. I even looked up where it had passed over me. Nothing in the branches. No signs of scorching or disturbance. But I've never gone back out jogging at night since, not even with a flashlight. Just can't make myself do it. I've lived in the same small town for most of my life. It's quiet, rural, nothing fancy. Houses spread out, lots of trees, wide open fields, not many people, and not much noise except the wind and the occasional tractor. I'm in my 70s now, and I spend most days just puttering around the house or sitting on the porch with my dog, Max. He's a big mutt, half lab, half who knows what, but he's been my companion for over 10 years. There's one thing I've noticed lately, something that doesn't make much sense, and I don't really talk about it much because I figure people would just shrug it off, but I thought maybe putting it down here would help me figure it out. It started a few months back in the late afternoon on a Sunday. The sky was mostly clear, but there was this one weird cloud, low and slow, just sitting over my property. It wasn't stormy or dark, just there. Max started barking suddenly. Loud, sharp, like he was trying to warn me about something right outside the window. I looked up and down the yard, but there was nothing. No cars, no animals, nothing moving. I figured maybe it was a squirrel or a raccoon, but Max kept barking for almost 5 minutes straight, pacing by the window, teeth showing, tense as hell. That cloud stayed over the house for maybe half an hour, drifting just a little but never really moving on. And every time Max barked, it was like he was fixated on that spot in the sky. No thunder, no flashes, no planes, just that one cloud, like it was watching me or something. After it passed, Max finally stopped and settled down, but I was left feeling uneasy. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Dogs get weird sometimes. But then it happened again. A couple of weeks later, same thing. That exact kind of cloud appeared, slow and low, hovering over my property. Max started barking right away, going nuts at the window. This time I tried to get a better look. I grabbed my binoculars and watched the cloud as Max barked. It wasn't a typical cloud. It was darker than the others, kind of smooth on the edges, almost like it was shaped differently. It moved oddly, not like the wind was pushing it, but like it was holding position or drifting against the breeze. And every few seconds there was this faint, low hum. Not loud, but enough to feel it in my chest if I listened closely. Max kept barking, growling even, and he wouldn't let me open the door. I swear he looked scared. When the cloud finally moved off, the hum stopped and Max calmed down. But the whole thing just didn't sit right with me. Over the next few weeks, I kept an eye out for it. I started noticing that anytime this kind of cloud showed up, the same size, the same shape, the same slow hovering, Max would go crazy, barking, growling, pacing like something was out there that I couldn't see. One evening, I was sitting outside on the porch. The air was still, no wind at all. Max was beside me, calm, when suddenly he got up and stared straight ahead. I looked up and saw the cloud. It was right over the back field again, just floating there. Max barked sharply, running toward the edge of the field, but stopped a few feet away, tail down, ears back. I called him, but he just stood there, watching. Then that low hum started again. Barely audible, but definitely there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel like going out there alone, so I just stayed on the porch, watching the cloud and Max. After about 20 minutes, the cloud slowly started to dissolve, like it was evaporating from the edges inward. The hum faded, and Max came back to my side. Quiet. I checked the yard. Nothing was disturbed. No footprints, no signs of animals. Just the grass and the quiet. Sometimes I'd see neighbors out walking their dogs, but none of them ever mentioned anything about these clouds or strange noises. I thought maybe it was just me and Max, some weird thing we'd picked up on. But then last week, I was at the general store talking to an old-timer named Joe. I told him about the cloud and Max's barking. He nodded slowly and said, "You're not the only one noticing it." He said a few folks out by the edge of town had seen the same kind of cloud. Slow, hovering, no rain or wind. Some said it felt wrong, like it was watching them too. That's when I really started paying attention. The next night, the cloud showed up again. Same time, same place. I grabbed my phone and recorded a bit. You can't really see much, just a dark blob against the night sky. But the sound, that low hum, comes through faintly if you listen. Max was barking the whole time, refusing to come inside. He wouldn't even eat his dinner until the cloud moved off. After that, I started noticing other odd things. My watch sometimes stopped working, the TV flickered when the cloud was near, and even my truck's radio would cut out. Just little glitches, but they all happened when that cloud was overhead. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but it happened a few more times. Each time, Max acted the same. Tense, alert, aggressive. One night, the cloud stayed for hours. I sat outside, watching it, feeling more and more uncomfortable. The hum wasn't constant this time. It would come and go, sometimes dipping into silence for a few minutes, then coming back. I looked around the field, scanning for anything out of place, but it was just empty grass and trees. Then I noticed a faint light, like a tiny flicker near the ground, about 50 yards from where the cloud hovered. It wasn't a flashlight or a fire, just a steady, pale glow that moved slowly side to side. Max growled low, and I felt this tightness in my chest, like something was wrong. I thought about walking over there, but I didn't want to leave the porch. I stayed put, watching until the cloud finally drifted away and the light disappeared. Since then, I've stopped trying to explain it. I don't know what that cloud is or why Max reacts like that. I just know that when it's here, things get strange. The silence feels heavier. The air feels thicker, and Max doesn't want to be left alone. I keep thinking about those glowing eyes dogs have sometimes when light hits them. Max's eyes don't just reflect light. When that cloud is near, they look different, like they're glowing from inside. I tell myself it's nothing, maybe an old dog's imagination, but I'm not sure anymore. Sometimes when I'm sitting on the porch late at night, I catch a glimpse of something just beyond the trees. Something watching. But when I look directly, there's nothing there. That's all I can say. It's just been happening, and I'm not sure what it means. All I know is that cloud shows up, and Max knows. And I'm left trying to make sense of it with no real answers. I was night fishing off the coast, maybe a mile or so out from the inlet. It wasn't unusual for me. I've done it for years, sometimes solo, sometimes with my cousin. That night, I was alone. Calm water, no wind, stars just barely visible through a thin cloud layer. The kind of quiet where the only sounds are the creak of the boat and the occasional plunk of water against the sides. I dropped anchor around 10:30 p.m., figured I'd do some bottom fishing for a few hours before heading in. I had a small lantern hanging off the back rail and a headlamp strapped over my hat. No other boats in sight, just dark water all around and the faint glow of the shoreline way off behind me. I cast out and waited. I wasn't catching much, but I didn't care. I liked the quiet. Around midnight, I heard this tapping sound. It wasn't the usual kind of creak or bump you get from waves or the anchor line. It was slow and steady, like someone lightly knocking on the hull. 3 taps, then a pause, then 3 more. Not loud, but clear. I stood up and swung my light around, thinking maybe some driftwood had bumped up against me. There was nothing, just black water in every direction. I leaned over the side, shined my headlamp down into the water. It only lit up a few feet, but there was no debris, no fish breaking the surface, no birds. I figured maybe it was the current playing tricks or something brushing underneath that I couldn't see. Then it happened again. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. I walked to the other side of the boat, but the sound didn't follow. It stayed near the rear by the stern, close to where the lantern was hanging. I knelt down and leaned over, listening. The tapping stopped for a few minutes. Just as I was about to stand up, it came back, this time right below where I was crouching. 3 slow taps, then nothing. I pulled the lantern up, thinking maybe it was attracting fish or something, but as soon as I did, I felt this weird sensation, like the air changed. Not colder exactly, just denser, heavier. I could hear my own breathing in my ears, and everything around me seemed quieter than before. No bugs, no birds from the shore. Even the water seemed to stop moving. I stood there holding the lantern and staring into the water for maybe 10 minutes. Nothing moved. Then the boat shifted slightly, like something brushed against it from underneath. That's when I got the first real spike of unease. I've had sharks bump the boat before, even dolphins, but this was different. It wasn't a hit or a jolt, just a slow, almost deliberate push, like someone placing their hand on the hull and dragging it. I turned off the lantern to see better out into the dark, thinking maybe the reflection was messing with my night vision. When I did, it was like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. I couldn't see anything. No stars, no horizon, not even the outline of the water. Then I heard it again. 3 taps, same rhythm. I turned the lantern back on and scanned the water with it, moving slowly in all directions. Still nothing. I dropped the light down on a rope and lowered it toward the surface, hoping to get a better view below. That's when I noticed the surface of the water wasn't reflecting properly. It looked dull, not rippling like normal, almost like glass with something behind it, warping the light slightly. I reached down and dipped my hand in, half expecting it to be colder or thicker or something, but it felt normal. Just regular seawater. I pulled my hand out and waited. Then I saw the light flicker. Not from the lantern, from below it, like something passed between the light and the bottom of the boat. It was fast, just a ripple in the glow, like something large had glided past beneath the surface. That's when I hauled the lantern up quick and reeled in my line. I didn't care if I left the bait or the rig, I just didn't want it hanging overboard anymore. I started the engine. It coughed once, then died. Tried again. Nothing. 3rd time, it sputtered for a second, then cut out completely. I checked the fuel line, a back spark plug, kill switch. Everything looked fine. No reason it shouldn't start. I keep a backup battery-powered radio for weather reports and emergencies. Pulled it out, turned it on. Just static. I checked the antenna, switched channels. Nothing but hissing white noise. It felt like something was messing with everything electronic. Even my headlamp started dimming, though the batteries were fresh. I sat in the captain's chair and waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe for something to break the surface or for the fog to roll in. I didn't know. Then the tapping started again. This time, slower. 1 tap, pause, 2 taps, pause, 1 more. It felt like it was trying to communicate something, though I couldn't make sense of it. I stayed frozen in the chair for a long time. I didn't look over the edge again. I didn't touch anything. I just sat there, listening. Eventually, I realized the air had gone back to normal. The pressure in my head eased up, and I could hear the distant hum of crickets from shore again. I tried the engine one more time. It started on the first turn. The radio clicked on too, just as suddenly, mid-broadcast, like nothing had happened. I didn't waste time. Pulled the anchor, turned toward the inlet, and headed in as fast as the boat would go without risking anything. When I got back to the dock, I tied off and checked the hull with my flashlight. No scratches, no dents, nothing unusual. But I noticed the lantern, the one I'd pulled up before, had gone completely dead. Batteries were fine. Bulb wasn't burned out. It just wouldn't turn on again. I left it on the workbench in my garage. A few days later, I checked it again, and it worked like normal. I haven't gone out solo at night since then. I've been back out on the water plenty of times, even near the same spot, but only during the day. And I've never heard that tapping again. I was on patrol late one night, driving a stretch of highway that cuts through mostly empty farmland. It's usually quiet out there around 2 or 3 a.m., just the occasional car or truck passing by. Nothing unusual. I'd been on this route for a few hours, doing the usual, checking speeders, making sure there's no drunks or stranded motorists, that kind of thing. The road is straight for miles, with fields on both sides and only a few clusters of trees here and there. It's the kind of place where if something's off, you notice it right away. Around 2:45 a.m., I got a call about a semi-truck pulled over on the shoulder near mile marker 87. Nothing about the driver, just that the truck was stopped with the engine running and the door open. No one at the wheel or standing nearby. The dispatcher told me to check it out, but be careful. Sometimes there are drunks or people breaking down, and sometimes things aren't what they seem. I got there in about 5 minutes. The highway was empty except for the semi parked just off the road. The truck was a big rig, a white Peterbilt with a trailer that didn't have any obvious markings. It was idling quietly, lights on, but no driver in sight. The door was wide open, swinging a little in the breeze. I slowed down, flipped on the patrol lights, and pulled up alongside the truck. That's when I saw it. Right around the tires, in the dirt and grass circling the truck, there were these strange burn marks. Not your typical skid marks or tire burns. These were perfectly round, like someone had traced a circle with a hot iron all the way around the truck. The ground was blackened in a clean, even ring, about 10 feet across. The circle didn't break or smudge. It was just there, clear and almost unnatural. It looked fresh, like it had just happened. I stepped out, radio in hand, eyes scanning the area. No sign of the driver anywhere. No footprints, no tracks leading away from the truck, except the usual tire tracks on the shoulder. The engine was still running, the exhaust puffing out in small clouds in the cold night air. I called dispatch to report the situation and requested backup, just to have someone else check the area with me. I walked around the truck, looking for anything that could explain what I was seeing. No signs of struggle, no dropped belongings, nothing. The cab was empty, seats pushed back like someone had just gotten out quickly. The driver's door was wide open and the interior lights were still on. The radio was silent and the keys were still in the ignition. I reached inside and switched off the engine. The hum died down, leaving a heavy quiet. I shined my flashlight into the cab, scanning every corner. The dashboard was normal, no alarms or warnings. The GPS unit was on but frozen on the last location, right here on the highway. I opened the passenger door. The trailer was locked, no way to get inside without the key, which wasn't in the cab. I circled back outside, looking again at the burn marks. They were strange, definitely not something caused by fire from the engine or brakes. No signs of heat damage on the truck itself, just the ground around it. The grass outside the circle was untouched. I knelt down and touched the dirt. It was dry, not scorched to the touch, almost like the blackened ring was a stain rather than actual burn marks. My phone buzzed with a message from dispatch. Backup ETA 10 mins. I told them to hurry. I wasn't feeling comfortable at all. The night air felt thick, heavy, like something was pressing in. I scanned the fields around the truck, looking for movement or lights. Nothing. No houses or farms nearby, just empty land stretching to the horizon. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the stars flickered dimly. I decided to check my own cruiser's dash cam footage from when I pulled up. The camera caught the truck from a few angles. I rewound the tape, looking for anything odd. For the first minute, it was normal. Me pulling up, headlights on the truck, engine running. Then, about 30 seconds before I stopped, I noticed something strange on the right side of the frame. There was a faint, almost transparent figure standing near the back of the trailer. I blinked, rewound again. The figure was just there, tall, thin, no clear features, pale but not glowing. It didn't move, just stood still, facing the truck. I watched closely for a minute, but it vanished as soon as I switched on the patrol lights. I stared at the screen, feeling cold. The figure was only visible for about 3 seconds, barely there, like a trick of the light or a glitch in the camera. But I know what I saw. Backup showed up right after that. 2 other officers got out and started helping me search the area. We called for a K9 unit to check the fields, but the dog didn't pick up any scent or tracks. It was like whoever or whatever had been there just disappeared. We stayed there for almost an hour. The truck stayed silent and empty, the engine off, the door still open. We checked the radio frequencies for any emergency signals, but found nothing. There were no calls from the driver, no distress signals. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The silence around us was almost too quiet. No insects, no animals, nothing but the hum of our own radios and the crunch of boots on gravel. When the tow truck finally arrived to haul the rig away, I took one last look at the burn marks. The circle was still there, black and sharp against the grass and dirt. The tow driver said he'd never seen anything like it. I filed the report as abandoned vehicle, BIA, since no one came forward to claim the truck or report it missing. The company registered on the trailer, never answered calls or emails. The driver was never identified. I checked local news for days after, hoping for some explanation, maybe a bad accident, a chase, or a rescue, but there was nothing. No sightings, no reports of missing persons matching the truck's description. That night stuck with me, not just because of the truck or the circle, but because of that figure on the camera. So clear and still, and yet impossible to place. Sometimes I replay the footage in my head and watch for it again, but it never appears the same way. I'm not sure what happened out there on that lonely stretch of highway. Maybe someone left in a hurry, or maybe it was something else altogether. All I know is the truck was there, running and empty, surrounded by that perfect circle, and something was watching from the shadows. I went home that night thinking I'd handled another strange call. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop wondering who or what just vanished without a trace, leaving only a black ring and a flicker on a dash cam to mark where it had been. I was on a red-eye flight from Chicago to Denver, sitting by the window in row 17, middle seat. It wasn't a busy flight, mostly business travelers trying to get some sleep before meetings. I don't usually care much about window views on planes, especially at night, but this time I was wide awake for some reason. The seatbelt sign was off, and the plane had leveled off at cruising altitude, just below the cloud layer. I looked out the window almost absent-mindedly and caught something, a flash of light. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the cabin lights, or maybe a star. But then I noticed a shape, a dark silhouette, moving alongside the plane. It was below the cloud layer, staying steady with us. I blinked and looked again, trying to make sense of it. The plane was cruising around 35,000 feet, so I wasn't expecting anything to be flying right beside us. The shape didn't have any lights that I could see. It was just a dark, smooth shape moving exactly with us, matching our speed and altitude horizontally. I tried to point it out to the guy next to me, but he was already asleep with headphones on. The flight attendants were passing by with their carts, chatting quietly with passengers. I asked the woman across the aisle if she saw it, but she shook her head, saying she hadn't looked outside yet. For a while, I just watched it, feeling kind of weird. It was moving so steadily. No signs of turbulence or flapping wings or engine noise. It didn't look like any plane I've ever seen. No flashing navigation lights, no blinking strobes, nothing. I pulled my phone out, hoping to get a photo, but the windows were tinted heavily and the low light made it nearly impossible. I tried snapping a few shots anyway, but all I got were black squares with a faint outline. I started wondering if it was some kind of military drone or a weather balloon, but none of that made sense to me. The shape was way bigger than any drone I'd seen, and weather balloons don't move that fast or stay that close. Also, the thing just kept pace with us, no change in speed or altitude. I checked the in-flight entertainment screen to see if there was any mention of something unusual in the news or weather alerts, but nothing. The other passengers were quiet, some watching movies, others dozing. The shape was there for maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. I kept looking back and forth, half expecting it to vanish, but it stayed right where it was. I didn't feel like calling the flight attendants over because it seemed like something I shouldn't say out loud, like I'd sound crazy or cause a fuss. Then, around 40 minutes in, the shape started to slowly pull away. It didn't fly off in a dramatic burst or anything. It just gradually drifted behind us, descending slowly until it disappeared below the cloud layer. I felt kind of strange after that. My ears popped a little, and I got this mild headache, like I'd been staring too hard at something I wasn't supposed to see. When I glanced back out, the sky was empty, just stars and clouds. The rest of the flight was normal. The captain came on to say we'd be landing soon, the usual stuff. I kept my eyes on the window a few more times, but the shape didn't come back. I asked the flight crew when we landed if anyone else had reported anything unusual, but they looked at me like I was joking or maybe had a weird dream. I didn't push it. I never saw any news reports or anything about strange aircraft that night. No announcements from the airline about military exercises or anything that might explain it. It's been a while now, and I'm still not sure what I saw. It wasn't a plane or a bird, not something normal. But it also wasn't some flashy UFO with lights or beams, just a dark shape pacing me in the sky, quiet and steady. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else on that flight saw it and just didn't say anything. Or maybe it was just me, seeing something that wasn't really there. I don't know. But I remember watching that shape moving beside us, silent and unblinking, like it was there for a reason I couldn't figure out.